A young man named Ichiju found himself in a dire situation, witnessing an attack by a minotaur. The giant creature attacked him, nearly swallowing him whole. As his life neared its end, he wished he could be reborn in another world. He dreamed of battling magical creatures, marrying into royalty, and embarking on grand adventures. In his final moments, the minotaur cruelly devoured both halves of his body. Amid the darkness, a holographic status screen appeared, showing strange information, confirming his first death and his connection to another world. The screen revealed that he had unlocked a special skill called Return from Hell. Slowly, Ichiju woke up and found himself in an office. Confused and drenched in sweat, he gasped for breath, looking down at his legs. A mix of shock and relief washed over him as he saw they were still attached to his torso. He wondered if he had just experienced a nightmare. At that moment, his colleague Sayama caught his attention and motioned for him to look behind. Before Ichiju could react, a woman stealthily wrapped her arms around his neck from behind, locking him in a chokehold like a wrestling move. He immediately realized it was Nanase, his office manager, and felt the immense pressure of her grip. She asked why he had been ignoring her lately and if he was feeling unwell. When she loosened her hold, Ichiju collapsed to the floor, gasping for air and struggling to catch his breath. He muttered that he was just feeling sleepy, but her sudden strong grip had woken him up completely. Nanase teased, asking if he wanted her to make him sleep forever, to which Ichiju politely declined. During that moment, he recalled the moments before waking up at his desk, still anxious from the lingering nightmare. He could still vividly remember the sensation of being chewed alive. Nanase approached him with concern, asking if he was sure he wasn't overworking himself. Ichiju dodged the question, saying he would submit his report by the end of the day. She gently held his face, pointing out the dark circles under his eyes, emphasizing the importance of taking care of his health and maintaining good physical condition. At that moment, Ichiju felt a strange sensation, as if he had experienced this conversation before. After Nanase left, Sayama approached Ichiju, his eyes filled with envy, wishing for the same care from her. Ichiju advised Sayama to finish his work quickly, or else he might get blown away. On his way home, Ichiju felt an eerie sense of familiarity with the events around him, as if everything was repeating from the past. He wondered if it was just his mind playing tricks on him due to age. As he walked down a dark, deserted road, Ichiju suddenly heard the sound of metal scraping against the ground. Confused by the noise, he wondered if something heavy was being dragged toward him. However, in the darkness, it was hard to see clearly. Suddenly, a massive and terrifying minotaur appeared before him, holding a giant blood-stained axe, implying it had been used to kill before. At that moment, Ichiju was horrified to realize that the dream he thought he had was actually a frightening reality. The minotaur's thunderous roar startled him, triggering an immediate reaction. He ran as fast as he could, trying to escape death. In an astonishing move, the minotaur leaped into the air and landed right behind him. With terrifying strength, it swung the massive axe, sending Ichiju flying into a nearby wall. The impact was so powerful that he spat out blood. Then, all Ichiju could feel was the intense pain engulfing his entire body, making it hard to breathe as he desperately clung to life. He tried to move, but his legs refused to obey. In a panic, he looked ahead and saw the lower half of his body lying on the ground. His heart sank as he watched the minotaur lift his severed lower half and eat it right in front of him. Ichiju was bewildered by the unexpected situation, and oddly, he remembered that he was still a virgin. His vision began to blur, making him wonder if this was how his life would end. As he drew closer to the darkness, a holographic status screen appeared, announcing a new quest from the Minotaur, tasking him with defeating the creature to pass the challenge. Confusion flooded Ichiju's mind. He wasn't sure what the quest meant, or how he could possibly face the Minotaur when his fate seemed sealed. Ichiju was left bewildered, wondering what the hologram was implying about the quest, and how he could possibly defeat the Minotaur when his situation was so dire. As the Minotaur continued to devour Ichiju, despite his frustration, he suddenly woke up in his office. The familiar holographic status screen appeared again, informing him of his mission failure. Its reappearance startled him, making him wonder if everything that was happening was caused by the monster. The status screen vanished briefly, then reappeared with new information, confirming his second death and awarding him a bronze trophy, along with a 5-point increase in strength and defense. Confusion swirled in Ichiju's mind as he tried to understand the changes and the mysterious nature of the status screen. As he recalled the previous events, Nanase once again approached him, asking if he was paying attention to what she was saying. Ichiju was baffled by the hologram hovering before him. He pointed at it, demanding that Nanase explain its meaning. She stared at him blankly, then asked what he was talking about. This confirmed Ichiju's suspicion that he was the only one who could see the status screen. He jokingly teased her for not being able to see it. Nanas responded by locking him in a powerful chokehold. Afterward, Ichiju sat quietly in a chair, trying to piece together the events that had occurred. He gradually realized the repeating pattern of returning to the office each time he was killed. Reflecting on this, Ichiju understood that going home would lead to another Minotaur attack. This dilemma made him carefully consider his next move, and he finally decided that he wouldn't go home again. Ichiju decided to return to the office, fearing he would be attacked outside. Not wanting to believe he was the only one still alive, he tried calling for help from anyone nearby. When he reached the vending machine area, he spotted Sayama sitting in a chair. At first, he felt relieved, but as he got closer, that relief quickly turned to horror. A goblin was pulling out Sayama's guts and eating them. Ichiju immediately covered his mouth to stop himself from screaming in shock. Noticing him, the goblin charged toward him, putting Ichiju in immediate danger. He frantically tried to think of his options, knowing that if he didn't act quickly, he would die. With no other choice, he decided to face the goblin and defeat it to survive. He remembered from video games that goblins were usually the weakest monsters. However, facing one in reality was completely different. He lacked confidence in his ability to defeat it. Overwhelmed by fear, Ichiju collapsed to the ground, crying out in desperation, begging the goblin not to come closer. Despite his pleas, the creature rushed at him with determination. In a final attempt to save himself, Ichiju threw his phone at the goblin's head. Even though the phone hit its mark, it had no effect. The goblin pounced on Ichiju, sinking its teeth into his neck. Wasting no time, it pulled out a wooden club and delivered a brutal blow to Ichiju's head, causing blood to gush out instantly. For a moment, the goblin seemed distracted by something, catching Ichiju's attention. His mind spun, wondering why the goblin was wandering aimlessly. However, he decided to seize this golden opportunity to counterattack while the creature was off guard. Without hesitation, Ichiju launched a powerful punch, sending the goblin flying several meters, crashing into a nearby wall. The force of the strike shocked Ichiju himself, as he hadn't realized this newfound strength, and he was puzzled by how he had survived the goblin's brutal attack. He began to suspect that the status screen he had seen the day before might be connected to this new strength. As the goblin tried to move again, Ichiju decided not to give it any chance to retaliate. Quickly, he rushed forward, grabbing the goblin's own club, and repeatedly smashed it into the goblin's head, until its skull turned into a shapeless puddle of liquid. After defeating the monster, Ichiju collapsed to the ground, exhausted from the pain, fatigue, and the lingering bloodlust still coursing through him. Lying there, Ichiju began to contemplate the possibility of death approaching. A status screen appeared once again in front of him, announcing that his level had increased from 1 to 3. Additionally, it informed him that he had earned a bronze trophy for his first victory in defeating a monster. Notably, his strength had increased by another 5 points, as he struggled to bear it. When he awoke, Ichiju once again found himself back at the starting point, just like the times before. Nanase checked on his health again, but this time Ichiju ignored her concern and dashed outside. He ran up to the rooftop, where the lingering sunset still glowed, signaling the final night before the world's collapse. Overwhelmed, he collapsed, his legs trembling, and he fell to the ground, grappling with the confusing question of how to escape this endless loop of horror. Once more, the status screen appeared before him, displaying the stats and accumulated points he had earned. Ichiju suddenly realized that, despite dying numerous times, the levels and points he had painstakingly gained remained intact through each trial. He pondered the strange similarity between these events and a video game, but ultimately concluded that giving up now would be too soon. Determined to continue, he resolved to endure every challenge with unwavering spirit. Ichiju returned to his desk, lost in thoughts about the impending end of the world only hours away. He told himself he would not surrender, and affirmed his strong will. However, his thoughts were interrupted when Nanase suddenly smacked him on the head with a rolled-up magazine. She scolded him for talking loudly in the office, pointing out that everyone else had already gone home. Trying to cover up, Ichiju lied, saying he still had a lot of work to do, and convinced her to leave first. Nanase, suspicious, asked if he planned to stay up all night again. Trying to cover up, Ichiju lied, saying he still had a lot of work to do, and convinced her to leave first. Nanase, suspicious, asked if he planned to stay up all night again, but her cold glare forced him to back down. He decided to give in, fully aware of how terrifying Nanase could be when angry. Suddenly, he remembered that going home quickly might lead to another encounter with the Minotaur. In a desperate move, he struck a strange pose and loudly called out status, since the screen seemed to respond to spoken words in his past attempts. The status screen appeared before Ichiju in a surprising event. As he looked at the screen, he noticed that his individual level had reset to 1, but his total level remained at 3. He felt a sense of satisfaction as his strength and endurance far outmatched the other stats displayed. Curious, he hypothesized that touching the screen might reveal details about his abilities. His theory proved correct, as information about the special skill Return from Hell appeared. This passive ability activates upon the wielder's death, allowing them to return to a specific point in the past, distorting the chain of cause and effect and warping the nature of reality. Ichiju wondered why each time he died, he was always brought back to the office. In a moment of realization, Ichiju swiped the screen and noticed that any new notifications disappeared after a single swipe. Intrigued, he continued to explore the stats further. His attention was quickly drawn to the appearance of a new ability icon. Driven by curiosity, he tapped the icon, opening up a menu of selectable abilities. As he was studying the new skills, Nane suddenly walked by and called his name, startling him. For a brief moment he panicked, fearing she might notice the status screen, but then remembered that only he could see it. Nanase asked why he was still at the office and hadn't gone home yet. He replied that he was waiting for her to finish, which made her sigh in disappointment. She then asked if he was still following the company's old motto, and Ichiju recalled the saying that once encouraged employees not to leave before their boss. After a moment, Ichiju said goodbye to Nanase and focused back on figuring out how to upgrade his level. However, just as he was about to leave, Nanase called him back, reminding him that he shouldn't hesitate to talk to her if anything was troubling him. After she left, Ichiju headed to a store, buying essential survival items. This was part of his strategy, to survive until his level improved, while identifying the office as a temporary safe zone for his leveling journey. He spent time browsing the web to stay updated on any monster news. Among the various stories he found, there were reports of terrifying creatures, including a sighting of a dragon in China at 3 a.m. Finally, Ichiju decided to leave the office to level up. He prepared carefully, equipping himself with a helmet and some kitchen knives, before stepping out onto the streets. As he walked along the road, he noticed that the situation wasn't as chaotic as he had imagined. Still, he was determined to move forward, knowing that a monster was surely lurking somewhere. Just as he expected, a shocking scene unfolded before his eyes. A man in a car, his head cleanly severed. The terrifying sight caused Ichiju's stomach to twist violently. Though a wave of nausea rose up, he forced himself to remember that he needed to get used to these horrific scenes, as they might become a daily occurrence. While trying to face the moment of horror, a commotion erupted at the end of the street, drawing Ichiju's attention. He realized that goblins were causing chaos and threatening 2 police officers who were trying to protect civilians. Ichiju hesitated, unsure at first whether he should intervene. He was torn, wondering if he was capable of facing a group of 5 goblins at once, especially since the officers were armed and might be able to defend themselves. However, in that crucial moment, the notification screen appeared again, providing details of a new mission. This time, he was tasked with defeating 100 E-rank goblins scattered throughout the area. Completing this mission was necessary to advance to the next stage and continue his journey. He was stunned by the reality that he needed to kill 100 goblins, an overwhelming task that seemed impossible. As the goblins began attacking civilians, one police officer shot a goblin in the head, causing it to drop instantly. Curious, Ichiju moved closer to check if the goblin was truly dead. Suddenly, the goblin sprang up, lunging at the officer and stabbing a knife into his face. The shock snapped Ichiju into action, and he began to run, realizing that even bullets couldn't bring these creatures down, forcing him to choose escape. Facing the reality that he stood no chance against such overwhelming numbers, he reluctantly accepted that his survival mattered more than the lives of others. However, Ichiju then spotted Nanase in the crowd. Falling to the ground, he saw the terror on her face, just as a goblin rushed toward her, ready to strike. Instinctively, Ichiju dashed forward, trying to grab the goblin, but the creature dodged with incredible agility. Nanase, surprised to see him there, stared in shock as Ichiju urgently ordered her to run from the imminent danger. He reminded her of the company's motto, emphasizing the importance of never leaving the boss behind. Motivated by memories of how Nanase had always cared for him, Ichiju resolved that this time he would protect her. Facing 5 goblins, Ichiju unleashed extraordinary strength, taking down each one with precise, swift strikes. He rushed toward Nanase, shouting for her to run. Nanase realized that the goblins he had just defeated were getting back up, astonished by the fact that he couldn't kill a single one. He explained that there was no way for him to defeat all of them. The goblins continued to advance, forcing Ichiju to quickly scoop Nanase onto his back, deciding that they had to escape together. Nanase blushed with embarrassment, conscious of her weight as Ichiju carried her. Feeling uncomfortable, she tried to shift, but Ichiju urged her to be patient, assuring her that he would get her safely back to the company headquarters, which still seemed to be a safe haven. Feeling uncomfortable, she tried to shift, but Ichiju urged her to be patient, assuring her that he would get her safely back to the company headquarters, which still seemed to be a safe haven. As they fled, Nanase scolded Ichiju for his reckless actions, emphasizing that one small mistake could cost him his life. He chuckled and apologized, but she also thanked him for saving her life. Nanase mumbled something quietly, but Ichiju couldn't catch it, so he asked her to repeat herself. She quickly denied it and told him to stop staring at her. As they continued running, Ichiju wondered if he could really protect Nanase in such a crazy world. Elsewhere in the chaos, a man hid inside a sack, desperately searching for information, amid a city buried in smoke and rubble. An old helicopter flew overhead, passing through the devastation. Back in the office, Ichiju was helping his boss, Nanase, who was clearly in pain. He tried to ease her discomfort, but her pained cries made it clear that he wasn't doing it right. "Don't touch that, it hurts!" Nanase groaned, her voice filled with pain and frustration. Ichiju firmly encouraged her to endure it, as if resilience was an easy thing. "Just a little longer," he reassured, a mix of optimism and confidence. After a while, he set her down, noting that her leg injury wasn't fatal, and she agreed, saying she was starting to feel better. She thanked him for helping, and he told her he had food and water prepared, though he advised her to eat and drink moderately. When he opened the supplies, Nanase was surprised by how well prepared he was for an unexpected situation like this. Suddenly, she noticed something and asked him about it. Ichiju, confused, didn't understand what she meant, until he panicked upon seeing her holding up a men's magazine he had bought earlier. She was surprised that he had time to purchase something like that in the midst of such chaos. He quickly snatched the magazine back, his face turning red as he awkwardly explained. Nanase laughed, saying there was no need to be embarrassed. She was just surprised. She teased him, saying it was completely normal to buy such things. Outside, everything seemed peaceful, with cars passing by as usual. Ichiju glanced out the window, and Nanase asked about the situation outside, wanting to know if the terrifying monsters were still around. Ichiju replied that everything seemed fine for the moment. Then, he pulled the curtains closed and suddenly realized something odd. Why had his boss been at a convenience store in the middle of the night? She explained that she had been working late at the office and was just trying to stay awake by going out to shop. Ichiju silently thanked himself for being so prepared. At that moment, Nanase sat huddled, knees to her chest, clearly shaken, with a look of deep anxiety in her eyes. She told Ichiju that she had witnessed many people die right in front of her. Everything had been perfectly normal until those terrifying monsters suddenly appeared out of nowhere. She wondered aloud why they had chosen this moment to strike. Ichiju had no answer, but he recalled that the monsters had attacked and eaten many people. The weapons humans used for defense were useless against them. It wasn't just the city under attack. The entire world was descending into chaos. Nanase predicted that by the next morning, the world as they knew it would be completely destroyed. For Ichiju, it was hard to believe that the world was truly ending. He wondered if that included Nanase, and the thought of losing her sparked a surge of fear within him. Hurriedly, he went to the corner of the room where Nanase had drifted off to sleep, gently placing a blanket over her and promising to see her again in the morning. Having died 3 times already, Ichiju had learned that they would be safe in the office until dawn. But to keep surviving, he knew he needed to level up. As exhaustion hit him, he sat down for a moment, then glanced at the clock, realizing he couldn't rest too long in the current situation. Seeing Nanase gave him a renewed sense of motivation, and he stood up. He told her that he would definitely return safely and that she should rest a little longer. Despite Nanase weakly asking him to wait, Ichiju felt the responsibility to protect her outweighed everything, so he decided to leave. He stepped out into the deserted streets. a knife in his hand, determined to level up and fight the goblins and any other monsters he could find. As he moved forward, Ichiju heard distant screams and gunfire coming from the urban area, and he decided to avoid that direction for now. Hiding behind an abandoned car, he saw flying creatures carrying human bodies with their insect-like legs. It was a horrifying sight as the beaks of the creatures pierced through their victims' bodies, effortlessly carrying them past Ichiju's line of vision. He wondered where these creatures were taking the bodies and realized an important lesson: always watch the skies. However, walking in the middle of the street felt like waving a flag to welcome monsters. Alleys? They were death traps, full of carnivorous plants. The only solution was to stay away from the alleys and stick close to the edges of the street, where it was safer to encounter lower-level monsters. That was his plan to raise his stats and level up. As the sun reached its peak, time slipped away like an invisible hourglass. Ichiju had no intention of letting time slip through his fingers. While running, he caught a glimpse of what appeared to be a car, but it was in fact a monster charging straight toward him. Panic flared up, and he realized the harsh truth. There was nowhere to hide, only the option to dodge. He quickly darted into an abandoned building for cover. Inside a convenience store, a goblin emerged from the shadows. Ichiju's first instinct was to run, but he quickly realized this was the opportunity he had been waiting for. If he didn't start fighting soon, he would never level up. The goblin in front of him was unarmed, but there seemed to be more lurking nearby. Glancing around, Ichiju pulled out his knife and decided to take down this goblin. The goblin lunged at him, and Ichiju quickly realized its weakness wasn't in the usual spots. Stabbing it in the chest or neck wouldn't work. The only way to kill it was to make a clean cut across its throat from ear to ear. But the task was too difficult for Ichiju. His kitchen knife was too dull to slice through the goblin's tough skin. Ichiju continued to struggle with the goblin, and finally managed to decapitate it. The battle had increased his stats from level 1 to level 2, but he didn't feel excited. There was still something unsettling about having to kill monsters. He then heard a noise and saw a bloodied woman crawling out from the shadows. Quickly, Ichiju noticed a pile of bodies similar to the woman's. He recalled the monstrous wasps that had taken the dead bodies back to their nest. He had stumbled into a goblin nest, and to confirm that, the creatures began emerging from the shadows in overwhelming numbers. Ichiju found himself in a perilous situation as the goblins surrounded him, their hungry eyes fixed on their potential meal. His mind raced to find a solution. In a desperate gamble, he dramatically pointed toward an imaginary object in the distance, hoping to distract the goblins long enough to make an escape. But this clever trick failed, as the goblins remained unfazed and easily saw through the illusion. Without hesitation, Ichiju sprang into action, running with the speed of a gazelle, adrenaline surging through his veins. The goblins snarled and chased after him, their terrifying growls echoing in his ears, reminding him of past horrors. He tapped into his inner athlete, using the speed and determination that had once made him a star in national track competitions. Ichiju skillfully maneuvered through obstacles, his heart pounding as he sprinted toward the exit. Memories of his triumphant moments on the track fueled him, urging him to push past his limits and outpace the goblins chasing him. He maintained a steady rhythm, silently encouraging himself as the escape route came within reach. But just as everything seemed to be going his way, fate cruelly twisted. 2 grotesque goblins suddenly appeared out of nowhere, blocking his path to freedom. Ichiju found himself in a suffocating situation, with his options dwindling like a dying flame. He considered a daring leap from the second-story window. Adrenaline surged through his veins as he bolted toward the staircase, his heart racing faster than a hummingbird's wings. This was a race against time, and the goblins behind him were no less dangerous. The staircase became a battleground as he navigated each step with urgency and desperation. The goblins, like relentless shadows, were closing in, making his situation as tense as a suspenseful thriller. Cornered like a trapped rat, Ichiju found himself surrounded on the staircase, the goblins closing in like a pack of ravenous wolves. The walls seemed to close in as panic surged, threatening to consume him. In this breathless moment, Ichiju wondered if this was the end. However, his resolve gradually hardened. With a heavy sigh and ironclad determination, he made a life-altering decision. Every chance seemed to be against him, but he accepted his fate and prepared to face another haunting descent into the abyss. It was a bittersweet realization, a plunge into cold darkness like the tense climax of a horror movie. Just as Ichiju was about to give up, a sudden thought struck him. If he died, who would protect her. He had promised to keep her safe and to return to her. That promise ignited a fire within him, giving him the strength to push past the terrifying monsters and keep running. He couldn't die. He had to fight. Ichiju's mind frantically searched for a weapon against the advancing creatures, urgency flooding his thoughts as panic began to take hold. In a desperate move, he summoned the status screen, and it slowly appeared before him. Physical enhancement and body augmentation skills were listed, both at level 1. Time was slipping away, but a wave of determination washed over him. Without hesitation, Ichiju launched himself into the air, descending swiftly and decisively. With intense focus and energy, he charged straight at the goblins, delivering a powerful blow that sent them scattering in all directions. The room fell eerily silent as Ichiju landed, his chest heaving from the effort. Surveying the aftermath, a sense of both relief and caution washed over him. The goblins that had once threatened him now lay scattered across the floor, the danger seemingly extinguished. This was a moment of victory, as brilliant as a beacon of achievement, a testament to the skill and hidden strength within him. His status screen revealed a significant boost in strength and endurance, and Ichiju was astonished by the transformative impact of a single strike. However, the sight of a few goblins stirring, reviving, reminded him that the battle was far from over. Undeterred, a fresh wave of determination surged through him, his confidence shining as he faced the newly resurrected goblins once more. Ichiju surged forward with unshakable resolve. Each strike and parry fueled his momentum, driving him deeper into the heart of the battle. His determination flared, and he vowed to bring this confrontation to a decisive end. His relentless attacks continued, his movements graceful and meticulously calculated. As the battle raged on, a notification from the status screen caught his attention, like the glimmer of treasure in the darkness. A bronze trophy symbolized his achievement, the enemy of goblins. Victory was within reach, and his heart swelled with a sense of accomplishment and anticipation. With newfound confidence, Ichiju loudly challenged any remaining monsters hiding within the building, daring them to face him. He no longer feared any of them. Ichiju's level had risen from 2 to 4, with his strength at 10, endurance at 24, and stamina at 25. Despite the victory, he felt a twinge of disappointment, thinking that after defeating such a large group of monsters, his stats should have increased more significantly. Suddenly, another notification appeared, surprising him. It revealed that he had just completed a high-level quest, defeating the goblins. A total of 100 goblins had been vanquished, and the reward was now his. The initial shock quickly turned to excitement as he realized he had completed the mission and earned the bronze trophy. Ichiju decided that facing his next monster could wait. The most important thing now was the incredible reward he had just received. Opening the reward, he found that he had gained an additional 10 points, along with a bonus of 2 more, bringing the total to 12 points. Adding the 4 points from before, he had accumulated a total of 16 points from this battle. It felt like he was soaring, elated by the massive boost. With these points, he would unlock new skills to better fight against the goblins he had just faced. Additionally, he received a 3% increase in damage, making him feel even luckier. On top of that, his strength in battle increased by 20%, further solidifying his confidence. Out on the city streets, monsters still rampaged, and formidable foes like the Minotaur, along with other ancient adversaries, drew near with deadly intent. Now, armed with 16 points, Ichiju stood at a crossroads, ready to allocate them across various skill stats. These points, earned from slaying goblins, could be used to unlock new abilities. Standing there, curious and ambitious, Ichiju gazed at the diverse array of skills before him, opening up a world full of potential. One skill in particular caught his eye, the art of crafting weapons and armor from raw materials harvested from monsters. These passive skills promised the creation of powerful gear. The allure of this skill captured Ichiju, its potential glowing brightly as he advanced in his abilities. The techniques within his reach became more complex, leading him down the path to mastery. However, achieving these valuable skills wouldn't be easy. Mastery required more than ambition. It demanded gathering essential monster materials, a journey that would test his patience and dedication. Safety had to be his top priority, right? Ichiju's mind raced, considering the limitless possibilities. The ability to detect danger and scout enemies sparked in his thoughts like stars twinkling in the sky. An idea suddenly lit up in his mind. These skills weren't just static. They had special levels of their own. Speaking of levels, Ichiju's physical strength, now firmly at level 2, stood as a badge of honor, something he had earned through sheer effort. And then, just as Ichiju began to feel powerful and confident, the status screen appeared with a proposition that made him raise an eyebrow. "Want to spend 20 points to level up?" it teased. Ichiju stood in shock, his mind swirling with confusion and disbelief. 20 points? He thought. These points had been hard-earned, won through a journey of struggle. With a disappointed shake of his head, Ichiju declined the offer, unable to fully accept that he was faced with such a difficult decision. He weighed his options carefully. Spend the points to reach a level of superhero-like strength, or remain as he was, accepting the role of an ordinary hero. It was a moment of reflection, where ambition clashed with reality, and Ichiju found himself at a crossroads, unsure of which path to take. Who would have thought that mastering skills would feel like negotiating with the universe? Ichiju's analysis skill was still at level 1, and the experience points from defeating goblins were no longer enough to level him up. Enhancing this skill intrigued him, as it could open the path to understanding the strengths of enemies, enabling more strategic battles. This newfound knowledge could pave the way for slaying monsters and unlocking new abilities. Beckins, upgrading his stamina from level 1 to level 2, was a goal that demanded more points. In his mental labyrinth, the idea of boosting this ability lingered, but after much consideration, Ichiju decided to stick with his current skills for now. As his gaze landed on the body of a defeated goblin, an unexpected discovery dawned on him. His skill allowed him to view its status bar. Glancing at his phone, he noticed it was already noon, and another worry tugged him back to reality. Ichiju quickly made a decision. He had to return to his workplace to ensure her safety. As he stepped onto the street, the scene shifted dramatically. 2 massive wolves appeared before him, formidable opponents with far superior stats. The big question loomed. Could he overcome this challenge? Or would he fall? As Ichiju prepared for the confrontation, the 2 wolves suddenly retreated. Strange, right? He stood there, puzzled, wondering if they had fled out of fear. Maybe his newfound strength had intimidated them. Lost in thought about this mystery, he nearly forgot the opportunity now before him, to make a run for the office building. Yet he couldn't help but notice the eerie silence of the city. No gunfire, no screams, and none of the chaos brought by monsters. Then a familiar sound chilled him to the bone. Slowly turning around, bam, there it was, Minotaur, the most fearsome beast. Suddenly, the silence made sense. The giant creature had driven everyone into hiding, but there was one positive. Minotaur was still quite far away, giving Ichiju a chance to escape. However, he hesitated, wondering if running was really the answer. He had faced and defeated 100 goblins on his own. Maybe, just maybe, he could face and defeat this monster. But as he approached and looked at Minotaur's status bar, reality hit him hard. Its resistance was at 112, and its strength a staggering 190. There was no way he could bring down something so monstrous. Ichiju sprang into action, feet pounding against the ground. The difference between the Minotaur and the goblins was as clear as night and day. The Minotaur charged rapidly, closing the distance between them, and with a single powerful swing of its horns, it sent Ichiju flying through a building, bloodied but unbroken. He continued to press on, an unstoppable force on his mission. Now Ichiju noticed a crucial detail on the status bar. His recovery rate exceeded 1%. This indicated that the Minotaur was gradually regaining some of its initial strength, like a pendulum swinging back to its origin. With mere inches between them, the Minotaur drew closer, while Ichiju's desperate cry echoed his final effort to stop the beast. But the Minotaur's status bar revealed its strength had doubled, a chilling realization that it was now an even more formidable opponent. The path ahead grew dark, leading to an uncertain fate. The spectre of death loomed over Ichiju as, for the 4th time, he faced this terrifying situation, bracing himself for what could be his final battle. Suddenly, Ichiju's eyes snapped open. Startled, he leapt out of his chair, only to crash straight into his boss. Still disoriented and not fully realizing he was back in the office, Ichiju stood there in confusion as his boss snapped, "What the hell are you doing?" She continued to scold him harshly, asking what he would do if any employees had seen that scene. After finishing her rant, she left the office, leaving Ichiju alone. At first, Ichiju still believed he hadn't died and had planned to let the Minotaur kill him. But in that instant, he realized the truth. He had died and had just been revived. A sudden wave of fear washed over him, sending him into panic. He remembered the terrifying surge in the Minotaur's strength, from level 45 to level 80. He also recalled a notification stating that the world's reversal rate had exceeded 17%. This made him wonder if the increasing world reversal rate was causing the monsters to grow stronger. Ichiju came to the conclusion that, as time passed, the monsters would continue to get stronger. Determined that fighting them would be futile, he decided to run. That night, Ichiju hailed a taxi and told the driver, Axel, to take him to Kanagawa Prefecture. His plan was to get as far from the city as possible and maybe bring Nao with him if he found a safe place. Suddenly, Axel informed him that there was a wild boar on the road. This struck Ichiju as odd, since it was rare to see wild boars in town. Ichiju turned to look at the road, only to spot a massive level 12 wild boar. He quickly realized that monsters were starting to appear more frequently. He couldn't shake the feeling that something terrible was about to happen. Out of nowhere, the taxi came to an abrupt stop. When Ichiju asked what was going on, Axel, sweating profusely, could only stare ahead in terror and stammer. Leaning forward to look, Ichiju was shocked to see a car sliced clean in half. Both Axel and Ichiju were horrified to see a level 37 orc standing in the middle of the severed vehicle. Ichiju quickly ordered Axel to drive away immediately. Though terrified, Axel managed to speed away from the scene, trying to escape the danger. However, just before they could escape, the orc leaped to the side of the car, and with a single swing of its weapon, it crushed the vehicle, brutally killing both Axel and Ichiju. Ichiju was resurrected shortly after and woke up again, back in the office, as if nothing had happened. Later that day, he boarded a train, realizing that Kanagawa wasn't safe either. Hoping he wouldn't encounter any more monsters, Ichiju had only one thought: escape the city, get as far away as possible. Everything seemed fine until, suddenly, the train began to tilt and jerk violently. The other passengers were terrified and confused, unsure of what was happening. But only Ichiju, with a look of horror, could guess what was unfolding. The monsters had returned. This time, it was a massive baboon, its jaws clamping down on one of the train cars, crushing it instantly and killing everyone, including Ichiju. Once again, Ichiju woke up in the office, as if he had never died. He continued trying different ways to escape the city, but all his efforts were in vain. Panic began to set in as he realized he was trapped in a loop of death and resurrection. In one attempt, Ichiju was killed by a giant spider, in another by a bat-winged humanoid, and in yet another he was slain by the Minotaur again. He even tried escaping by train, but this time he was killed by the Kraken. It felt like an endless cycle of suffering, as if he was only reborn to die again. It was truly a living hell. After yet another resurrection during the night, Ichiju slumped into his chair, exhausted. At this point, Jack, concerned, asked if he was okay, but all Ichiju could say was that he was going home. She watched him leave until he stepped out the door. Ichiju decided to try one final method: suicide. He thought that if he ended his own life, maybe he could finally escape this hell. With eyes hollow and filled with despair, he quickly made his way to the rooftop of the office building. Leaning against the edge of the roof, he closed his eyes and prayed that God would let him die. Suddenly, a hand pulled him back, stopping Ichiju from jumping. It was Nao. She yanked him away from the ledge and asked what he thought he was doing. Frustrated, Ichiju snapped back, asking what she was doing, but Nao refused to answer and kept struggling with him. Ichiju kept asking why she was up on the roof with him, but she remained focused on getting him to safety. As things calmed down, Ichiju's frustration slowly turned into concern. He asked Nao if she was okay, noticing her kneeling and struggling to catch her breath. She replied, saying it wasn't that she disliked him, but simply that she felt too hot. Ichiju decided to accept her explanation, even though he didn't fully understand what she meant. Brushing it aside, Nao mentioned that she was glad her intuition about him possibly attempting suicide was correct. Ichiju denied it, saying he was just trying to get some fresh air. Nao then asked if he was free and suggested they go out for drinks, saying it had been a while since they had done so, and reminded him that it was a boss's order, so he couldn't refuse. At the bar later, Nao ordered 2 large beers. Seeing Ichiju's face still clouded with despair, she took off her coat and told him to drink as much as he wanted, to not hold back. Ichiju told Nao that he wasn't in the mood for drinking and that everything felt meaningless. Just then, the waiter arrived, apologizing for the wait, and brought their drinks, mentioning that it was a fresh batch of beer. Nao looked at Ichiju and told him she understood, adding that he could go home, jump out of a window, or do whatever he wanted. On one condition, he had to finish his beer before her. With a weary expression, Ichiju decided to play along with Nao's game. He started drinking his beer, but in the blink of an eye, Nao had already finished hers and declared herself the winner. Accepting his loss, Ichiju kept his word and continued with the game she had set. He stayed at the bar, even ordering some food. Nao looked at him and remarked that it had been a long time since they had a chance to talk like this. She began reminiscing about their conversations after club activities back in school. Nao recalled a time when Ichiju had just joined the company and lost a proposal document, his face in a panic as if the world was ending. She pointed out that right now, he had that same expression. Nao, concerned, asked him what was going on, saying that as his boss, she cared about him. Ichiju hesitated for a moment, but eventually decided to open up. He asked Nao if she would believe him if he said that monsters would destroy the world in a few hours. Nao asked if he had any proof to back up his claim, and Ichiju confirmed that he did. He pulled out his phone to check the time, and told her that in just a few minutes there would be a post on their livestream site showing images of a dragon appearing in China. Just as Ichiju predicted, a few minutes passed, and suddenly posts with images of a dragon appearing in China flooded the internet. Shocked, Nao asked how he knew about this and if he was some kind of esper. Ichiju replied that, while he wasn't an esper, it wasn't far from the truth, because he had been repeating the same world over and over again, due to a special skill he had acquired, the skill Return from Hell. He then asked Nao to try calling out status because he wanted to check something. She did as he asked, and immediately a status screen appeared before her. Startled, Nao stepped back in fear, at first thinking she was hallucinating, but she quickly reassured herself that she wasn't drunk enough to imagine things. Ichiju explained that she wasn't hallucinating, and what she was seeing was a status screen, something only she could view. He further elaborated that he had been resurrected countless times, thanks to the skills and status screen. Nao suddenly realized that Ichiju's despair stemmed from his Return from Hell skill. She asked him how many loops he had experienced, and Ichiju responded that this was his 15th time, leaving Nao utterly shocked. She then continued, asking what had happened to everyone else when the monsters appeared. Ichiju responded that he didn't know what had happened to anyone outside of this town, but he knew that everyone in the town had been killed by the Minotaur. He also revealed that he had never survived past noon, and when Nao asked why, he explained that at that time, the monsters became stronger. Ichiju shared that no matter what he did to escape from the empowered Minotaur, every effort was futile. Even if he managed to remain unnoticed, they always found him and killed him. But each time he died, he returned to the past, back to life, only to be killed again. No matter how many times they killed him, he couldn't die for good. As Ichiju continued speaking, panic and fear steadily rose within him, while Nao silently listened. He went on to confess that he didn't know what to do with his life, lamenting that no matter how hard he tried to escape the monsters, they always found and killed him, trapping him in a horrifying, brutal loop. He expressed how meaningless it felt to talk to anyone, as the cycle seemed inescapable. Eventually, Ichiju calmed down, and an eerie silence filled the air. He asked Nao if she understood him, and if she did, she should just leave him alone because he was too tired. Just as he was about to step out the door, Nao spoke up, saying she finally understood. Ichiju was confused at first, but then Nao, clearly a bit drunk, started to unleash her emotions. She told him to sit back down, saying their conversation wasn't over yet. A bit intimidated, Ichiju sat down, thinking to himself that drunk people were really intense. Out of nowhere, she suddenly threw him to the ground and yelled that he was being an idiot. She asked him if he had ever tried facing the Minotaur before it became stronger. Seeing Ichiju's confusion, Nao explained further, asking if he had ever attempted to defeat the Minotaur before it gained its enhanced power, all while still grappling with him. Ichiju admitted that he had never tried doing that because he didn't see any hope in it. He continued to explain that in another town there was an orc attack, and in yet another, giant monsters were wreaking havoc. Ichiju explained that everything felt pointless, because even if he somehow managed to defeat the Minotaur, the cycle would just happen all over again. Nao, still pinning Ichiju down, firmly told him that he couldn't give up so easily. She even threatened to smash his face into the ground. Then she grabbed his collar and began shaking him violently. Finally, Ichiju pushed her away, demanding she stop. He told her he had no choice but to surrender, and if he could, he would choose to die right then, believing death was better than living alone in this world. Now crying told him to stop saying such things. Ichiju looked up and saw tears streaming down Nao's face. She continued, saying that he wasn't alone, no matter what time of day or which world he was living in. She promised she would always be by his side. Ichiju confessed to Nao that in one of his previous lives he had let her die, but Nao responded that he didn't need to worry about her. What mattered to her was being able to drink and laugh with him, and that was enough. She went on, saying that if he was in pain, she would be there to share that burden, and that he should never try to die in front of her again. Ichiju suddenly realized that he had died so many times and had been so focused on escaping that he forgot he should have been taking care of Nao. Nao, now sobbing, begged him never to say such things again. Once they both calmed down, Nao, embarrassed by the scene she had caused, apologized for her messy display. Ichiju comforted her, telling her not to be upset, and offered her a glass of water. Nao accepted, but Ichiju noticed her nose was running, and when he pointed it out, Nao felt even more embarrassed, calling herself ugly. Amused by the scene, Ichiju burst into laughter, teasing Nao about how serious she was, but she denied it, claiming she was too foolish to be serious. Finally, after regaining their composure and lifting their spirits, Ichiju took a big gulp of his beer and told Nao that he had decided to fight the Minotaur. Nao, in turn, declared that if that was his decision, she would fight alongside him. However, they both agreed that, at their current level, it was impossible. Ichiju admitted he would likely have to die a few more times, and Nao joked that she'd have to say goodbye to her current self for a while. Ichiju confessed he didn't know how many times he would need to die before reaching a level strong enough to defeat the Minotaur, while Nao reassured herself that she would return someday. They then made a promise to each other. Ichiju vowed to save Nao, and Nao promised she would wait for him. Outside, Ichiju mentally prepared himself for the upcoming battle, reminding himself that if he didn't change the future or stop the Minotaur from destroying the city, neither he nor Nao would survive. A fate he was determined to avoid. He continued to reassure himself that he was tired of running and had finally decided to confront the Minotaur head-on. This time, he was determined to defeat it. Ichiju mustered all his courage, walking down the hallway. Suddenly, a trash can tipped over, rolling suspiciously across the floor. Carefully approaching, he wondered what kind of monster could be inside, perhaps a leprechaun. To be safe, he drew his knife, ready to strike whatever was within. But to his surprise, a girl jumped out, pleading for his help. This left Ichiju confused until she explained how and why she had ended up in the trash can. She told him that she was on her way to a shelter with her mother and younger sister, but when her sister got lost, they turned back to find her. Upon returning, they discovered a monster lurking near her sister. Ichiju quickly understood the situation and agreed to let the girl accompany him, at least until he could help. Despite being worried about leveling up as soon as possible, he nearly stepped on a vine. Luckily, Aoi warned him just in time. However, Aoi herself became tangled in the vines, and Ichiju had to rescue her again. Later, she spotted her backpack, rushing over to grab it. The girl, whose name was Aoi, headed toward the backpack, but at that moment, a giant carnivorous plant revealed itself, ready to strike. One of its thick vines had already wrapped tightly around Aoi's younger sister. Mai seemed moments away from being devoured, and like any typical older sister, Aoi rushed forward without thinking, acting purely on instinct. Thankfully, Ichiju managed to stop her just in time, preventing her from putting herself in harm's way. If she had continued charging in, the giant carnivorous plant would have 2 victims to feast on, leaving no one to be saved. He held Aoi back, ordering her to stay behind him where it was safe, out of the plant's reach. Even as the plant's vines tried to feel around, Aoi remained beyond its grasp. However, keeping Aoi away wasn't easy. She kept screaming Mai's name, desperately trying to break free to save her sister. With a practical mindset, Ichiju understood that if Aoi entered the plant's strike zone, it would be the end for her. He firmly instructed her to stay still, while he bravely stepped into the danger zone, determined to be the hero and face the carnivorous plant head-on. As expected, after a few slashes, the carnivorous plant began to react. It ensnared Ichiju in its vines, prompting Aoi to rush in, comforting her sister and promising to save Mai. Seeing that Aoi had now entered the plant's range, risking all 3 of their lives, Ichiju acted quickly. He slashed through the vines holding him, pushing forward and delivering a critical blow to the monster, killing it and saving both sisters. The reunion between Aoi and Mai was brief. After thanking Ichiju for his bravery, something horrific happened. A new creature, likely stronger than the plant, suddenly appeared and beheaded both sisters right in front of Ichiju. Only moments ago he had risked his life, put himself in harm's way, to kill the monster and help others. The sisters' words of gratitude still echoed, saying they'd never forget his kindness. But then their heads were severed. They had kept their promise, but only for a short while. The sight left Ichiju trembling, overwhelmed with despair. The harsh reality Ichiju now faced was undeniable. A new, stronger monster had swiftly killed the two girls in an instant. Despite the suddenness and unpredictability of the event, this new creature, labelled as a level 22 man-eater, was even more formidable. Shaken by the shock, Ichiju quickly weighed his options: either flee and try to avoid the monster's attacks, or maintain his original resolve and face the creature head-on, even though its strength far surpassed his. In utter horror, Ichiju stared at the two sisters he had just saved. Only seconds ago, they were full of life, thanking him for his help, and now they stood there, headless. These monsters truly had no compassion. Now, Ichiju Akira had to make a split-second decision. Would he face the level 22 man-eater head-on, or would he flee to save his own life? Ichiju quickly concluded that there was no way he could take on this ferocious creature and win. The gap in strength between him and the man-eater was too great. His only option was to run. However, when he tried to escape, his body refused to move. Desperately, Ichiju fought to regain control of his body, but it seemed as if his instincts were forcing him to stay and fight. With the monster now too close, Ichiju realized that he had no choice but to fight for his life and for his friend Nao's. He drew his weapon, steadying himself as he prepared for the inevitable battle ahead. Fortunately, Ichiju was ready. The monster attacked first with a swift strike, attempting to catch him off guard. Ichiju dodged to the side just in time, narrowly avoiding becoming the man-eater's next meal. He knew that the creature's attacks were lethal, and one hit could end him. Glancing at his goblin dagger, Ichiju realized this battle would come down to who struck first. From his analysis, he understood that the man-eater's offensive capabilities were much stronger than its defense. The monster wasn't entirely invincible, after all. The man-eater lunged again, this time using its limb-like appendages to attack. Ichiju tried to block with his goblin dagger, but to his shock the weapon snapped in two. At that moment, he could have chosen to retreat from the fight, but he was too invested to back down now. Instead, he made a bold decision. He attacked with his fists, leaping high to gain an aerial advantage. With all his strength, Ichiju delivered a powerful punch, aiming directly for the man-eater's face. The creature's face split apart, and for a brief moment, Ichiju felt like he had achieved a hard-won victory. But the triumph was fleeting, as the man-eater immediately reformed, leaving Ichiju in utter despair. Stunned, he found himself unable to move, as the realization set in that there was almost no way to defeat the monster. The harsh reality hit when the man-eater delivered a powerful punch, sending Ichiju flying through the air. Bruised and battered, he looked around and saw bodies and the injured scattered across the streets. His thoughts turned back to the two young sisters who were now headless, and his close friend, Nao. He realized he was living in a cruel world. But instead of giving up, Ichiju's resolve only strengthened. He clenched his fists, as if to declare that he was not done fighting yet. Summoning all the strength left in his body, he lifted a nearby truck and hurled it directly at the man-eater. If this didn't work, the resurrected hero would likely face death once more. To his surprise, the truck toss worked. The man-eater, being a plant-based monster, was highly vulnerable to fire. The explosion from the truck ignited the creature, causing it to shrivel and shrink considerably. While the smaller burning creature continued to smolder, Ichiju easily finished it off with his fists. A notification appeared, informing him that he had leveled up, which confirmed he had defeated the monster. He also earned 20 points to distribute, and unlocked the passive skill, Physical Enhancement. A short time had passed since Ichiju bravely chose to confront the man-eater. His victory over the monster greatly boosted his confidence, making him nearly fearless when facing mid-level monsters. Now, Ichiju stood atop a tall building, waiting for the next challenge, another monster about to appear. This time, it was a mid-tier creature with horns and a hard shell. Fortunately, its tough exterior didn't mean it would be difficult to deal with. Ichiju leaped into action, quickly striking the monster with powerful punches. His strength was so immense that the creature's shell seemed meaningless. With a series of relentless blows, the monster's tough armor shattered completely, making it an easy fight. That was a good warm-up, Ichiju thought to himself, preparing for the challenges ahead. He stepped down from the building and checked his stats once again. Ichiju had leveled up quite a bit since the last time, not only through battling monsters, but also from dying and reviving 3 times since then. Now, Ichiju had reached level 25 and accumulated 10 more points. One skill Ichiju knew he needed to improve quickly was physical enhancement, which boosted his strength, endurance, and other abilities. He believed that if his skill reached a high enough level, he could finally defeat the Minotaur. However, this was easier said than done. Though his work so far had helped him level up, the pace wasn't as fast as he'd hoped. To upgrade his skills, Ichiju needed more points, and the easiest way to earn them was by completing quests and receiving rewards. But the thought of those quests sounded much more appealing if they didn't involve facing the Minotaur, whom he still wasn't strong enough to defeat. This left him trapped in an endless loop of struggle, not to mention his continuous cycle of dying and reviving. Still, aside from the Minotaur, Ichiju felt strong enough to take on most monsters in the city. While pondering his next step, Ichiju stumbled upon an intriguing option in the system while searching for good skills: Magic Circuit. The skill only cost 5 points to reach level 1. Magic Circuit was a passive skill that allowed even non-magical beings to become compatible with using magical energy. Depending on the size of the magic circuit created within the body, the ability to harness magic energy would increase. The size of the circuit was tied to the skill's level. After analyzing the potential, Ichiju concluded that this could be an extremely valuable skill. Even more importantly, he felt he had discovered a way to defeat the Minotaur without having to reach level 30. His theory was simple. He just needed to keep leveling up by fighting mid-level monsters to increase his magic power through Magic Circuit. With the potential to enhance this skill, Ichiju felt he had a much better chance of taking down the Minotaur. And so, he set out on a self-imposed mission: hunt and fight any monster that could help him level up, with the ultimate goal of a final showdown with the Minotaur. Of course, he would have to face several life-or-death battles against these creatures, but compared to the Minotaur, they were merely small challenges. Ichiju took down the first monster, then the second, and then the third. He eliminated them, using now as his source of motivation to survive and level up. Ichiju received a Bronze Hunter's trophy from the system and finally leveled up from 25 to 30. He woke up in the office after his latest death. It took him a moment to adjust to his surroundings after being revived, so he didn't immediately hear Nao calling his name. Nao shouted, frustrated that Ichiju was ignoring her, and as usual, she tried to pull him down with her familiar move. But this time, no matter how hard she tried, Ichiju seemed immovable. Nao, surprised by his sudden strength, expressed her disbelief. Ichiju took her hand and thanked her, leaving Nao even more confused. He thanked Nao for being a good friend and his source of motivation. According to Ichiju, it was her words that gave him the strength to fight at his fullest. Nao, utterly baffled by what Ichiju was saying, could only stare. Ichiju told her there was something he wanted her to say to him when all this was over, but for now, he couldn't reveal everything. Akira then asked Nao to stay inside the office and never leave, no matter what happened outside. Nao tried to get Akira to explain everything, but he quickly left, leaving her standing there confused and watching him go. Ichiju stepped out of the building and onto the streets, ready for the next phase of his mission. Ichiju had spent a long time training, working hard and waiting for this moment. Now he had to pour every ounce of strength into facing the Minotaur, including his new magic circuit skill. The streets were still bustling with life, and monsters had yet to appear. If these people knew what was coming, they certainly wouldn't be so indifferent. Ichiju walked to the spot where everything began for him, the place where he first encountered the Minotaur. As soon as he arrived, a system notification appeared, prompting him to seek out and confront the C-rank Minotaur. Ichiju stood there calmly, perhaps because he knew the beast would soon come to him, and just as expected, the massive and brutal creature materialized right in front of him. This time, it was different from before, when Ichiju had lost his nerve and tried to flee. Now he felt completely ready to carry out the long-awaited revenge against the Minotaur. Though he no longer feared the creature, the sheer size and terrifying presence of the monster was enough to make even the bravest souls run. Ichiju felt a chilling sensation crawl up his spine. A little fear wasn't such a bad thing. After facing the Minotaur countless times, Ichiju had learned a lot about its strength and attack patterns. This time he made the first move. Charging toward the Minotaur at full speed, he landed a punch squarely on the creature's face. forcing it to stumble back a few steps. It seemed like both were just warming up. For several minutes, Ichiju unleashed a barrage of punches from all angles. The Minotaur fell but immediately stood back up. A mocking grin appeared on its face, signaling that Ichiju's attacks had barely made an impact. It was clear this battle would be a long one. Meanwhile, the entire city descended into chaos. People began running in all directions, desperately seeking shelter. The noise from the panicked crowd reached as far as Ichiju's office, where Nao overheard it. She rushed to one of the building's hallways, where she had a clear view of the city. Nao recalled Ichiju's warning. She obeyed his instructions and stayed inside, at least for now. She wondered if his final warning had anything to do with the current state of the city, and if something terrible had happened to her friend and colleague, Ichiju. Nao might have gone outside to check, but Ichiju's words echoed in her mind, keeping her firmly inside the building. Meanwhile, Ichiju and the Minotaur were locked in a fierce battle. After letting Ichiju have the upper hand for a moment, the massive beast let out a deafening roar, its fully white eyes glowing like streetlights. It lifted its massive axe-like weapon and charged at Ichiju. The ground beneath the Minotaur seemed to tremble under its weight, as if the monster had a single murderous objective. Though Ichiju had faced the Minotaur more than a few times and could predict some of its moves, that didn't mean he was completely immune to its attacks. Every time the Minotaur struck, it seemed to have the upper hand. Worse, Ichiju's attacks only left a few minor scratches on the beast. The Minotaur swung its massive axe toward Ichiju, and he barely dodged in time. But the monster was so fast that Ichiju didn't even see the follow-up punch until it was too late. A powerful blow to the face sent Ichiju flying several meters, his back slamming hard against the wall of a nearby building. According to Ichiju's analysis, the Minotaur had a strength value of 190, while his endurance was only 76. This was expected when a level 45 monster clashed with a level 30 human. Ichiju knew that if he took a direct hit from the creature, it could very well be the end of him. The Minotaur charged toward him again, and Ichiju had to act fast to avoid being finished off. Luckily, he had one last trick up his sleeve. Magic Circuit. Ichiju activated the sprint ability through Magic Circuit, instantly boosting his sprinting speed, giving him an edge far beyond what he had before. At level 1, the sprint skill boosted Ichiju's speed to 10 times his normal capacity, though it drained energy quickly. Activating sprint allowed Ichiju to dodge the incoming attack from the Minotaur, narrowly avoiding a direct hit. He also tried to land a few punches on the creature, but being unfamiliar with his new speed, he misjudged the necessary force and only managed a light hit, nearly losing his balance. However, he realized something important. Even that light hit had dealt some damage to the Minotaur. Recognizing the potential of the sprint ability, Ichiju decided to keep using it. This time, he focused on a single point and measured his strength more carefully. But he remained mindful of the skill's time limit. Sprint could only be sustained for 60 seconds, meaning he had just 1 minute to finish this battle. The Minotaur charged at Ichiju again, but this time it wasn't as fast as before. It seemed that sprint not only brought Ichiju up to the monster's speed, but even allowed him to surpass it. The Minotaur was caught completely off guard, not expecting Ichiju to outpace it thanks to the magic circuit. Ichiju rushed forward, delivering a powerful punch to the Minotaur's upper body. Yet, despite the strength behind it, the Minotaur barely seemed fazed, standing up as if nothing had happened and continuing its assault on Ichiju. At this point, the battle had become a spectacle for any neutral observers, except that most people were too busy fleeing from the monsters rampaging through the streets. The fight had dragged on for some time, and thanks to his sprint ability, Ichiju had landed multiple powerful blows, strikes that would normally have ended the fight, but the Minotaur kept rising, counter-attacking after each hit. Was this monster truly invincible? Ichiju knew he had to figure out a way to end the battle because his sprint ability would run out in mere seconds. If that happened, it wouldn't just lead to his death, it would endanger Nao's life and the entire city. Then, it struck him. He had one final plan to finish the fight. If this didn't work, he didn't know what else could. After gaining the upper hand in the hand-to-hand combat, Ichiju pushed the Minotaur through the wall of a nearby high-rise building where their battle had led them. As the Minotaur plummeted from the height, Ichiju followed closely behind, launching himself down with a final decisive punch aimed at the creature. He was determined to end it all. It had been a grueling battle, but Ichiju knew this was the moment to finish it once and for all. As Ichiju plummeted toward the ground, images flashed through his mind of all the times he'd been killed by monsters, of the girls he saved only for them to be slaughtered by the Minotaur moments later. He recalled how his once ordinary life had been ripped away from him. Fueled by a mix of rage and conviction, Ichiju declared that the battle was over, summoning the final skill he intended to use to finish the beast, steel beams. He channeled all his remaining strength into one devastating punch, ensuring that the blow would follow the Minotaur all the way to the ground. Ichiju's punch obliterated the ground upon impact, nearly destroying the entire surrounding area. A cloud of debris, wood, stone, and dust filled the air, obscuring the results of his powerful attack. Standing there, waiting in suspense, Ichiju feared that the Minotaur might re-emerge. As the dust settled and there were no signs of the creature, Ichiju's confidence grew. He started to believe that he had finally won and felt a surge of relief wash over him. The long battle seemed to be over at last. However, just as he was about to rest and plan his next move, to meet Nao after waking up, Ichiju realized that the system had yet to send a mission complete notification. Had he missed something? Suddenly, the ground beneath him began to tremble, and his moment of triumph quickly turned to despair. When the Minotaur emerged from the rubble, it became clear that everything Ichiju had done had only slowed the creature down for a brief moment. Despite the gaping hole in its chest, the Minotaur was still alive, and it seemed even angrier than before. It let out an earth-shattering roar and charged at Ichiju with terrifying speed. The roar echoed across the surroundings, drawing the attention of those nearby. Some witnesses saw something plummet from the sky and slam into the hard ground, leaving them stunned. A few even thought it might have been a bomb. As the dust cleared, they realized what had fallen wasn't a bomb. It was a person. Confusion and disbelief spread through the air. Ichiju lay motionless on the ground, watching as people rushed to his side, calling for help. A worried woman ran over, asking if he was all right. But Ichiju couldn't speak clearly. He wasn't sure if he was alive or dead. His body felt numb, and despite his attempts to warn her about the danger, the woman couldn't understand his message. Suddenly, the Minotaur charged again, smashing through buildings as it barreled toward them, causing chaos. Ichiju felt the crushing weight of helplessness pressing down on him in the face of this challenge. The Minotaur had haunted him from a distant past, and each time the situation grew dire, he felt as though he was never strong enough to overcome it. This feeling had embedded itself deeply into his mind through countless previous lives, where the people he saved always ended up facing a brutal death. That thought sank Ichiju into an inevitable despair, believing that protecting or saving others was always beyond his reach. As the Minotaur completed its massacre, killing everyone around, it slowly turned toward Ichiju, each step drawing closer to him. Just as the Minotaur prepared to strike, something unexpected happened. A solid rock flew through the air, striking the creature directly in the eye with pinpoint accuracy. Enraged, the Minotaur began searching for the source of the attack. It quickly spotted Nao, trembling but holding a sturdy metal bar with fierce determination. She shouted at the beast, demanding that it focus on her, not Ichiju, and dared it to come after her. Ichiju, shocked and confused by Nao's sudden appearance, could hardly believe what he was seeing. After a moment, he regained his composure and desperately called out for her to stop, wondering why she was there, especially after he had warned her to stay safe in the office. As Ichiju desperately pleaded for her to run, Nao calmly replied, saying that a true leader must take care of their team, asserting her stance with unwavering clarity. The Minotaur locked its gaze on Nao, slowly advancing, its massive hands reaching out to grab her head, clearly planning to inflict serious harm. Suddenly, a clear idea struck Ichiju. He was exhausted from living a life without purpose, never able to protect anyone from danger. This time, he was determined to protect Nao from the Minotaur. Drawing strength from his love for her, Ichiju activated the sprint skill once again, throwing all caution to the wind. His resolve and courage drove him forward, ready to take down the Minotaur with a single powerful strike. As Ichiju ran, he felt his breath grow labored, his body burning with an intense heat. He knew he had pushed his body beyond its limits, but he also knew he was still alive, and that meant he would keep fighting. He wouldn't let Nao die. Ichiju had only 1 second left, 1 second to change his story, to change how he saw himself, and finally save the person who mattered most to him. In that moment, a memory flashed in his mind, a conversation between him and Nao, where she had asked if he was feeling sick or troubled, offering to share the burden with him. Ichiju also recalled his heartfelt promise to save her and the words she had spoken about waiting for him. These memories ignited a powerful surge of determination within him. Gathering every last ounce of strength, he instinctively reached for the abandoned axe of the Minotaur lying on the ground. In the final milliseconds, not only did he manage to reach the Minotaur, but with a remarkable precision, he delivered a decisive blow, slicing the creature cleanly in two. It was a breathtaking, dramatic victory. The Minotaur collapsed lifelessly to the ground, while those who had witnessed the event stood in stunned silence, struggling to grasp the magnitude of what had just unfolded in those fleeting moments. As the Minotaur fell, a wave of relief swept over the people around. A notification appeared, signaling that the Class C mission, Minotaur, had been completed. Instantly, a new wave of energy surged through Ichiju's body, granting him 50 bonus points. A silver trophy, along with other advantages. Moreover, his level skyrocketed from 30 to 38 in an instant. Finally, Ichiju exhaled in relief, knowing he had defeated his long-standing foe. Now slowly approached him, wrapping her arms around him in an emotional embrace, tears streaming down her cheeks as she clung to him tightly. With a trembling voice, Now asked, "How did you become like this?" Overwhelmed by exhaustion, Ichiju's body slowly sank to the ground, finding comfort as Now gently cradled his head in her lap. In a soft voice, Ichiju expressed his desire to share everything that had happened to him. However, before diving into his long story, he suggested they go have a drink together after everything they had been through. Just then, Ichiju's attention was drawn to a new notification that appeared before him. The message signaled his victory over the trials that had left a deep mark on his soul. Even more, it revealed that his special skill, Back from Hell, was being upgraded with an additional effect. This enhancement was a direct result of his new resurrection abilities, and with these upgrades, Ichiju would become stronger than ever. The notification also informed him that he had unlocked 2 new system features, Inventory and Scenario. And meanwhile, on a deserted street, 2 boys were running in panic, desperately searching for a place to hide from the monster chasing them. As they ran, they clutched their phones tightly, listening to news updates about the monster invasion that had thrown governments worldwide into chaos. The death toll had already surpassed 3 million in their country alone. After a while, they finally found a place to hide and caught their breath, taking a moment to rest. Amidst their heavy breathing, one of the boys asked his companion about his level and learned that he was at level 7. Curiously, he asked his friend about his own level. When his friend revealed that he was only at level 6, he added, with uncertainty, that he wasn't sure if they could survive this situation. The other boy responded, saying that they could make it if they had Bullman as an ally. Excited but unaware of Bullman's identity, the first boy asked who this person was. Surprised by his friend's lack of knowledge, the other boy showed him a video of Ichiju in the moment he defeated the Minotauro. The boy explained that the one who took down Minotauro was called Bullman by the witnesses, and he believed that Bullman was still somewhere in the city. Meanwhile, in another part of town, Nao was tending to Ichiju at the hospital. Sitting by his bedside, she carefully peeled an apple with a gentle smile and asked if he wanted to eat a little. Ichiju appreciated the offer, but told her she should eat instead. Nao reminded him that apples were rare now, but she didn't want to force him if he wasn't ready. She reassured him that he could eat when he felt prepared. Ichiju remembered that after the battle with Minotauro, he had been bedridden for 2 days due to exhaustion from the fight. Nao had explained earlier that the hospital was being protected by defense forces and that they had Wi-Fi thanks to internet users, or netizens, who had discovered that everyone seemed to have levels and stats, just like in a video game. People began to believe that life now resembled a game. As he reflected on this, Ichiju grew curious about Nao's level. But as he was about to ask, he noticed she had already fallen asleep. Ichiju gently called her name, and Nao groggily responded, apologizing for spacing out. Worried, Ichiju asked if she was okay and suggested she rest. Nao insisted she was fine and fully awake, but moments later, she drifted back to sleep, her head resting on his bed. Ichiju activated the progress display, and a notification popped up, showing the current progress rate was 2.66%. After thinking it through, Ichiju realized that 2 days had passed, but the progress rate remained at 2.66%. He remembered now mentioning that the progress rate used to increase by 1% each night, and even 1% after just half a day before. He realized the progress rate was slowing down. After some deduction, Ichiju guessed that the reason for this slowdown could be the drop in progress after defeating Minotauro. This meant that if they didn't defeat the boss monsters, the world reversal rate would continue to rise, and the monsters would grow stronger, to the point where no one could stand against them. Ichiju understood that someone had to step up and defeat the boss monsters. But after everything that had happened, he was the only one who could do it. However, Ichiju knew he didn't defeat Minotauro to become a hero. He only did it because he wanted to protect Nao. For him, protecting her was enough, and he had no intention of becoming a hero. To his surprise, Nao gently stood up from her chair and moved onto the hospital bed, lying comfortably next to Ichiju. A wave of shock and confusion flooded Ichiju's mind, making him wonder if Nao had begun to develop special feelings for him. He called her name hesitantly, but quickly realized she was only half asleep. Deciding to put this aside, Ichiju focused on addressing his weary body. He opened the status board and checked his overall stats. To his surprise, all his stats had significantly increased after defeating the Minotaur. His attention soon shifted to the newly appeared icons, inventory and scenario. Recalling they appeared right after he took down the Minotaur, Ichiju curiously tapped on the inventory icon. An empty interface appeared, reminding him of mobile games where the inventory is a storage for items. Curious about how it worked, Ichiju tried adding his smartphone to the inventory. However, upon looking at his hand, the phone remained firmly in his palm. He then attempted to remove the phone from the inventory, but discovered that the inventory didn't affect the phone. Next, he clicked on the scenario icon, but only received a message stating that the function hadn't been activated yet. This left him even more confused, realizing he couldn't use the scenario function for now. Ichiju decided to set these issues aside and deal with them later. Thinking about his options, Ichiju wondered if he should use the accumulated points to enhance his skills. When he opened the skill tab, he was shocked to find that his mana value was decreasing. Initially, his mana was at 14, but now it had dropped to 13. Ichiju wondered if the mana used for the sprint skill hadn't fully recovered yet. He continued pondering whether this meant his actual mana value was also the limit of its usage. Faced with this situation, Ichiju realized the urgent need to focus on enhancing the magic power recovery skill. After careful consideration, he decided to choose not only magic power recovery, but also auto-regeneration, physical enhancement, and several other skills. Ichiju was curious to check how long the magic power recovery skill would take to replenish his mana, as this was crucial to confirm. The magic power recovery skill restores mana based on the time that has passed, with the recovery time varying according to the skill's level. Ichiju also learned more about the auto-regeneration skill, realizing it gradually restored health over time. At that moment, he noticed the pain throughout his body beginning to subside and believed the skill was working effectively. Additionally, Ichiju upgraded the physical enhancement skill to level 3, spending 30 points, and noticed it increased his physical stats by 50. Ichiju felt confident that with all these new skills in hand, he would be able to fight even when facing stronger monsters. He reviewed the Sixth Sense skill and realized it enhanced intuition or instinctual abilities, potentially useful for making quick decisions in emergency situations. However, Ichiju still considered spending 12 points to acquire this skill, a rather expensive choice. Sixth Sense is a passive skill that allows the user to perceive beyond the typical 5 senses. Additionally, it grants the ability to sense the nature of things beyond the reach of ordinary perception. The power of the Sixth Sense depends on the skill's level. After leveling up his physical stats, Ichiju realized he only had 2 points left. He considered whether to invest them in magic power to enhance his sprint skill. In the end, he decided to invest those 2 points, and to his surprise, his sprint usage increased from 13 to 19. Ichiju realized that some skills don't increase point by point with each level, meaning players could customize their characters as they wished. He decided to focus on building a strength-based character. Satisfied with his power-up, Ichiju decided to rest and recover until he was ready to act again. A while later, Nao woke up, surprised to find herself lying in Ichiju's bed. With a gentle voice, Ichiju explained that she was only half awake and hadn't realized she was still in bed. Curiously, he asked her why she hadn't moved from her spot on top of him. Suddenly, Nao blushed and, with a playful tone, asked Ichiju what he would do if she said she didn't want to get up. Surprised by her words, Ichiju felt his face heat up, suddenly flustered. Nao moved closer, her lips almost brushing against his, a clear sign she wanted to kiss him. Unspoken emotions filled her actions. Just as Nao was about to kiss Ichiju, the door suddenly swung open, interrupting their private moment. A soldier entered without knocking, introducing himself as Lieutenant Colonel Karube from the Ground Self-Defense Force. He had rushed over upon hearing that Ichiju Akira had woken up. As he spoke, Karube noticed Ichiju in an awkward situation with Nao still on top of him, feeling slightly embarrassed. Karube jokingly told them they could continue and to feel at ease, but the two quickly clarified the misunderstanding. He agreed to wait a moment. After Nao returned to her proper seat, Lieutenant Colonel Karube reintroduced himself as Minoru Karube, a member of the Hospital Defense Force against monster threats. Karube thanked Ichiju for defeating the Minotaur and saving the city. He emphasized that Ichiju's actions had a profound impact on everyone, declaring him a beacon of hope for humanity. Just as Karube was about to ask Ichiju for a favor, another soldier suddenly burst in. The soldier questioned whether Ichiju had truly defeated the Minotaur. Staring at him, thinking Ichiju looked too weak to have taken down such a monster, this soldier, named Makimoto, went as far as to call Ichiju ragged and implied that he wouldn't be useful for much longer. Makimoto was interrupted by Karube, who asked why he was in the room. Makimoto explained that he just wanted to see what kind of person could defeat the Minotaur, but he was disappointed. He then noticed Nao and remarked that she was his type. Makimoto began flirting with Nao inappropriately, claiming that she belonged to him, which made her very uncomfortable. Makimoto continued, telling Ichiju that with the world's reversal rate, monsters had become much stronger. He didn't believe that Ichiju, looking so worn out, could protect himself, and suggested that Ichiju's defeat of the Minotaur was just a stroke of luck. Makimoto boasted that he was level 25 and the strongest person in the hospital. Then he grabbed Nao's hand and tried to pull her toward his room. Immediately, Ichiju firmly grasped Makimoto's hand, politely asking him to let Nao go as she was clearly scared. Makimoto, enraged, attempted to punch Ichiju, but Ichiju tightened his grip even more, causing a small crack in Makimoto's wrist. Makimoto screamed in pain, shocked by Ichiju's unexpected strength, especially since Ichiju was only level 9, but had incredibly high stats. Realizing he was no match, Makimoto's eyes welled up with tears, and he started sweating profusely. Ichiju released his hand, apologizing for gripping too hard without realizing his own strength. Karube told Makimoto to leave, and he quickly rushed out of the room. Karube apologized for Makimoto's behavior and returned to the original topic he wanted to discuss. He told Ichiju that a boss monster had been spotted near the hospital. If it attacked, they wouldn't stand much of a chance. Karube urgently asked Ichiju to defeat the boss monster for them, but Nao tried to refuse on Ichiju's behalf, explaining that he still hadn't fully recovered from the battle with the Minotaur. However, Karube was insistent, admitting that he had no other option. He opened up to Ichiju, acknowledging that even though Ichiju had a low level, his abilities were impressive. He didn't want to pry into the source of Ichiju's power, but he sincerely requested his help. After a brief moment of thought, Ichiju agreed. Karube expressed his heartfelt gratitude for Ichiju's decision. Once Karube left, Ichiju began to open up to Nao about the hardships he had faced in the past. Nao grew even sadder upon learning that despite enduring so many harsh trials, Ichiju was still determined to face another monster. As she woke, Nao wondered why Ichiju couldn't rest for a while. With a soft smile, Ichiju admitted that he had once given up on fighting. But Nao's presence had shown him that he wasn't alone, giving him the courage to face the Minotaur again. He declared that he wanted to protect the people he cared about, assuring Nao that he would defeat the boss and asked her not to worry. Nao responded by saying they could leave together, but only if they both faced the boss. Ichiju tried to protest, but Nao insisted, explaining that she wanted to fight by his side. She was adamant that he shouldn't challenge the boss alone, repeatedly asking to go with him. Suddenly, a scenario status window appeared, informing Ichiju that certain requirements had been met, and the scenario was ready to begin. The system provided more details about the scenario involving Nao, noting that he wasn't obligated to participate if he didn't want to. It was up to him whether to follow this path, and his resurrection ability would continue to assist Nao during this time, but afterward, she would no longer have access to that power. Ichiju was deeply surprised by the notification about the scenario, especially at this moment. Why now, and why now? Seeing the worry and confusion on his face, Nao asked him why his attitude had changed. He decided to be honest with her, but also tried to reassure her, saying it wasn't something she needed to worry about too much. Ichiju explained to Nao that he could see a screen showing the scenario could be triggered. Now, confused, admitted she didn't know what a scenario was. Ichiju explained it further, and she gradually understood that the scenario had appeared because she had offered to help Ichiju in the battle. Still, Ichiju wasn't entirely sure about it. Technically, if she died alongside him, both of them would be resurrected. To Nao, this didn't seem too bad. In fact, it seemed convenient for defeating the boss monster. When Nao put it that way, Ichiju hesitantly asked her to accept the scenario. However, deep down, he knew resurrection was more of a nightmare than a power. There were moments when you couldn't die, even when you wanted to. Ichiju bravely explained the situation to Nao clearly, so she'd understand exactly what she was getting into. She listened, but her mind was already made up. It didn't matter what Ichiju said. She declared that her resolve would not waver anymore. Ichiju wasn't surprised, as Nao had never been one to easily change her mind once she was determined. He silently vowed that he wouldn't let Nao endure the pain of resurrection, so he would do everything he could to ensure she didn't die in the battle. Meanwhile, Nao remained enthusiastic and ready to face whatever lay ahead, affirming that she fully understood what was at stake. The scenario notification appeared, stating that the scenario between Nanase and Ichiju was about to begin, and from now on, Nao would follow Ichiju's lead in the missions. The condition to complete the scenario was for them to defeat the boss monster together. Ichiju began strategizing and realized that if Nao was going to work with him, it would be best if they shared their stats, skills, and other information. Nao agreed, and Ichiju led by sharing his details first. As Nao reviewed his skill list, she understood why he was so strong. Nao decided it was time to repay him, but Ichiju quickly assured her that it wasn't necessary. Ichiju explained that with his current level of analysis, he could verify what was necessary. He mentioned that Nao was at level 16 and hadn't accumulated any points yet. Her endurance, strength, durability and speed stats were 18, 29, 27, and 28, respectively. As he continued analyzing, Nao pushed him away, annoyed that he could access her information without her permission. Ichiju tried to reassure Nao, explaining that it was just status info that anyone with a similar analysis level could view. However, Nao insisted that this information was personal data, and it might include her height and weight measurements, something she wasn't comfortable with people seeing without her consent. Feeling embarrassed, Ichiju quickly said he had no idea there was a section for measurements, and if there was, he hadn't looked at it. Nao replied that she knew he hadn't intentionally peeked, but he needed to be more cautious to avoid causing trouble, especially now that he had earned the nickname Bullman. Nao pulled out her phone and showed Ichiju trending videos on social media, capturing the night he killed the Minotaur. In the video, Ichiju was caught looking directly into the camera, and from that moment, the nickname Bullman was born. Ichiju apologized once again for using his analysis skill on her, but also admitted that he didn't like the nickname. Nao disagreed, thinking the nickname was cute. Ichiju then asked Nao about her skills, and she told him she had Physical Enhancement, Magic Circuit, and Beginner Magic. Those with Beginner Magic can learn basic level spells, and the power of these spells depends on their mana value, while the number of basic spells learned depends on the skill level. Ichiju was impressed and pleased to know that Nao would be more useful in battle than he initially expected. Nao explained that magic wasn't her strong suit, but she was excited to give it a try. Ichiju's enthusiastic expression made Nao curious, and she asked why he seemed so happy. Ichiju asked if the mana consumption decreased when she cast spells, and she replied no. However, Nao explained further that the more she used magic, the hotter her body became, gradually making her more exhausted. Essentially, beginner magic not only drained her mana, but also reduced her physical endurance. With this information, their battle strategy became clearer. Ichiju would take the lead as the vanguard, while Nao would provide support from the rear. Nao agreed with this strategy, as long as Ichiju was certain that he had recovered enough to face the upcoming battle. Ichiju reassured her, explaining that he was undergoing auto-regeneration, so his body was gradually healing, and he would be stronger by tomorrow. Nao decided to let Ichiju rest, asking him to relax and regain his strength. Meanwhile, the world's reversal rate had increased to 3.01%. Stepping out of Ichiju's hospital room, Nao encountered Minoru Karube, who was patrolling to protect against nocturnal monsters. Karube inquired about Ichiju's condition, and Nao reassured him that he would be ready by tomorrow. As they spoke, Nao heard a strange sound, instantly putting her on alert. Meanwhile, Ichiju remained in the room, telling himself that he could defeat the boss monster. With Nao by his side, suddenly, A screen flashed a notification. Nao had died, and her resurrection skill was being activated. Ichiju was stunned. Just a few minutes ago, she had stepped outside. What had happened? He woke up in a hospital bed with an oxygen mask, struggling to remember. The last thing he recalled was the screen showing that Nao had died. And then, perhaps, he had died too. But something felt off. He didn't return to the office, the usual starting point after each resurrection. Ichiju began to wonder if the resurrection starting point had changed, and at the same time, he noticed something unusual about the timing of this event. He started to question if things had shifted because he had defeated the Minotaur earlier. Then the truth hit him. He had let Nao die. That should never have happened under any circumstances. The door opened, and Nao walked in, calling his name. Ichiju immediately embraced her, relieved to see she was alive. Nao explained that she had indeed died. She recalled stepping out for fresh air and bumping into Karube. They chatted for a bit, and then, out of nowhere, a monster suddenly attacked her. Ichiju asked if Nao knew what kind of monster it was, but she said she didn't. All she remembered was a giant black creature. Then she was resurrected, back to the moment Ichiju first woke up at the main entrance. The monster killed her, resetting the time and affecting Ichiju as well. If this were true, Ichiju realized the situation was quite troublesome. The monster would return for Nao at some point during the night. Nao apologized for causing him trouble, but Ichiju told her there was no need to apologize, as things would change sooner or later. The change in the resurrection starting point was puzzling, but they both decided to prioritize preparing to defeat the monster first. Nao agreed and said she would inform Karube and the others about the situation. Ichiju slowly understood that the scenario Nao had accepted was more problematic than they had thought. If either of them died, they would both have to reset and start over from the hospital, which was currently their weakest point since Ichiju was still recovering. What made it worse was that they'd have to restart with Ichiju needing to regain his health from the beginning. He wondered if he could protect Nao this way, but decided to push aside the negative thoughts and focus on what needed to be done, making sure Nao wouldn't have to endure the painful resurrection process again. Nao asked about Ichiju's physical condition. Despite still being heavily bandaged, Ichiju assured her that his health had improved significantly. He believed he would recover more before the monster attacked. To speed up the recovery process, Ichiju decided to take a walk around the hospital and asked Nao to wait for him. However, as he walked down the hospital corridor, Ichiju suddenly lost his way, feeling as though he had taken a wrong turn. He approached the elevator and reasoned that perhaps it wasn't working. Large hospitals are often quite difficult to navigate, but he still had time before the monster invasion, so he decided to memorize as many pathways as possible. As he was doing so, he heard a strange sound, causing other patients to leave their rooms to see where the noise was coming from. It was an alarm, signaling that the monsters had breached the building. A man rushed into the hallway, confirming the breach and pleading for anyone capable of fighting to help. Ichiju asked the man where the monsters were, and he responded that they were at the main entrance of the building. In just a minute, the peace had vanished, and the entrance was swarmed by black wolves. The defense force was doing their best, but the sheer number of monsters overwhelmed them easily. This made Ichiju wonder if these black wolves were the same monsters that had attacked and killed Nao. Thanking the informant, Ichiju ran down the stairs completely confused, as the monsters weren't supposed to attack for a few more hours. Could notifying Karube and the others about the defense have changed everything? At the entrance, the defense team was using shields to try and hold the monsters back. Karube urged his team to do their best and hold the line, even as one soldier complained they couldn't endure much longer. Eventually, the defense broke, and the monsters began ruthlessly attacking the soldiers. Karube did his best to lead, counterattack, and urged the troops to hold their formation, knowing this was a critical moment. They couldn't give up. The wolves slaughtered many soldiers, but Karube decided he wouldn't let the monsters enter the building, even if he couldn't kill them all. He hoped to buy enough time for the survivors to escape. Just when Karube thought it was over, Ichiju arrived to the rescue. With a single kick, he sent a pack of black wolves flying. Ichiju apologized to Karube for not arriving sooner, but said he would handle the rest now. At that moment, a three-headed wolf monster appeared. Karube, amazed by Ichiju's strength, called him the commander. Nao ran through the hospital hallways until she reached the main entrance, where she saw Karube and a few other soldiers. She noticed Karube was seriously injured and asked if he was okay. He warned her not to go outside as it was too dangerous. Besides, Ichiju was dealing with the three-headed monster. The soldiers watched as Ichiju fought the beast seamlessly, and one remarked that he seemed more fierce than extraordinary. Another soldier thought Ichiju might fail at any moment. Suddenly, they saw Ichiju get knocked to the ground by the monster, and it charged at them. However, Ichiju lifted the monster with one hand. He realized his endurance had greatly improved, and the upgrade to his physical enhancement skill made a huge difference. Now, the next thing he wanted to test was his muscle strength. A soldier was astonished to see Ichiju block the monster's attack with just one hand, marveling at his incredible power. Ichiju decided that he had a personal vendetta against this monster. It was the one that killed Nao, and now it was its turn to die. He delivered a critical blow, ending the monster's life. The soldiers cheered, urging him to keep going, that he could do it again and finish off the remaining monsters. Nao silently watched as Ichiju faced the remaining creatures. His hand was injured and bleeding, but he refused to back down. Then he noticed something strange about these monsters. They had strange markings and an ominous pressure on their skin, just like the Minotaur before. This made Ichiju realize that the three-headed wolf he had just defeated wasn't the main boss, but merely a pawn. The other three wolves he was about to face were also just minions, and somewhere out there a main boss monster was controlling and directing these creatures. He realized the situation was more serious than he had thought. If the main boss appeared, they wouldn't stand a chance, especially in their current state, wounded and exhausted. Ichiju felt confused about what his next move should be, when suddenly they heard a sound that made the wolves flee. The soldiers were also shocked and wondered what had just happened. Ichiju wondered if that sound was from the main boss monster, commanding its minions to retreat. This could mean the monsters would regroup and become stronger, ready to wipe out the survivors of the recent battle. They had already lost 7 members of the defense force, and there were only about 18 uninjured people left. Ichiju quickly tried to come up with a strategy to defend against the monsters. The only thing that gave him some relief was that, although the reversal rate of the world was increasing, the monsters' strength hadn't changed much. They weren't getting stronger even as the reversal percentage rose. As he was deep in thought, Nao stepped up and apologized for not being able to help him much. She asked if the monster he just defeated was the main boss. Ichiju replied that no, it was just a minion. Nao wondered why they attacked so quickly, and Ichiju suggested that perhaps the monsters were ordered to target the hospital from the start. Ichiju went on to propose that they should stick to their previous tactics so as not to alter the enemy's strategy too much. Nao then asked about Ichiju's injured fist, and he explained that his auto-generation skill was slowly healing it. However, he realized that he couldn't keep relying on punches to get the job done. He needed a stronger weapon for support. At that moment, Nao and Ichiju noticed a hooded figure standing near the monster's corpse, holding a knife. Ichiju moved closer and asked the person's identity, thinking it might be Kashiwaba. However, when the hood was removed, both were shocked to discover it was a child. This left Ichiju stunned, unable to believe his eyes. The child recognized Ichiju as Bullman and asked if she could help him with anything. Ichiju pointed out that she was gathering materials and he would be grateful if she could craft a weapon for him. After some thought, she agreed, but admitted she didn't yet have crafting skills. She found it strange that Ichiju didn't have a weapon, especially since he was expected to defeat the Minotaur. She suggested he should have a hand axe. Ichiju thought the idea of a hand axe was quite reasonable, believing it would make fighting the Minotaur much easier. The girl mentioned that she knew where to find the weapon Ichiju was looking for and noted that its stats were extremely high. Ichiju was surprised to learn that weapons had stats, and the girl reassured him that weapons also had their own attributes. She offered to tell him all about it. At that point, they began discussing the Minotaur's axe stats, and the girl suggested Ichiju use his evaluation skill to check the weapon's stats. Ichiju realized he could look up the numerical value of any weapon. For example, the SDF soldier's gun had a +2 bonus value. He asked about the hand axe's value, and the girl, who now introduced herself as Kashiwaba, replied that she had some information, but it wasn't the item's maximum evaluation. She revealed the axe had a recommended strength value of 80 or higher. Ichiju also noticed that the weapon's attack power was 75, and wondered if it would add to his own attack power of 165. If so, it would be a significant boost. Although the weapon's effects weren't active, Ichiju decided that overall, it was worth acquiring. He thanked Kashiwaba for her help and she waved it off, saying it was no big deal. He asked if she could help evaluate more weapons if she found any, but she reminded him that she didn't have the evaluation skill. All the knowledge she had was from random encounters. She learned about the SDF gun from a soldier who was now dead. Kashiwaba was planning to acquire crafting skills at some point, and once she did, she'd be happy to share her knowledge with Ichiju for a discounted price. Ichiju was surprised to learn she planned to charge money, but he was also happy to have her by his side. Now caught Ichiju's attention again, and he took the opportunity to tell her that he was on a mission to retrieve the Minotaur's axe, and that she should rest for now. She offered to join him as she wanted to get started quickly. She emphasized that they could upgrade the next day, but for now she'd prefer to rest. She reminded him that going together was his idea, but if he saw her as a burden, she would find her own way to upgrade. 3 days had passed since the monsters appeared, and everything had descended into chaos since then. So, the best approach was to remain cautious. Ichiju advised Nao to stay behind him to avoid danger. They walked past cracked roads and fallen utility poles, clear signs that giant monsters might still be lurking nearby. As they approached a convenience store, Ichiju asked Nao to hang back. Nao, feeling annoyed, pointed out that he was being overprotective. Ichiju explained that there were high-level monsters around, and they should be as careful as possible. Nao argued that they weren't well protected, especially since all they had was a short gun Kashiwaba had given Ichiju. If she could learn and master magic, they'd be in a better position. Nao playfully aimed the gun at Ichiju, joking that it would be amazing if the weapon could shoot magic instead of bullets. Ichiju inwardly noted her childish personality. She then questioned whether the Minotaur's axe would still be in its place, as someone might have easily taken it, given how powerful a weapon it was. Ichiju disagreed, suggesting that the defense forces had tried to retrieve the weapon but failed. Finally, they found the axe, half buried in the ground on an empty street. But retrieving it would still be difficult, as it was surrounded by stone birds nesting nearby. These birds had tough skin and a sticky substance that could slow their opponents. Nao offered to retrieve the axe, but Ichiju intervened. He rushed towards it, realizing he had caught the attention of one of the stone birds. He told himself to hurry before the bird could attack. But before he could reach the axe, he found himself unable to move, trapped in the sticky substance he had missed on the ground. The birds began circling him, and Nao shouted for him to duck as she charged into the fray. Ichiju panicked, but Nao told him not to underestimate her. She fired the gun, and a burst of electricity shot out, temporarily scattering the birds. However, they were durable, and Ichiju knew he had to act fast. He pulled the Minotaur's axe from the ground, and aimed it at the stone birds. Ichiju and Nao worked together, planning to weaken the birds, while Nao delivered the final blow. For Ichiju, it was surreal fighting alongside Nao, wishing things could always go this smoothly. Nao directed Ichiju towards another black wolf, and he split it in half with the Minotaur's axe. Nao asked if that was the last one, and Ichiju confirmed it was. He then asked Nao what level she was at, and she replied that she had reached level 23. Ichiju praised her for progressing so much. He noted that she had been leveling up smoothly because she was facing stronger wolves. However, Nao pointed out that the attacks kept coming relentlessly. Ichiju agreed, mentioning he had killed over 20 wolves. He also observed that their aggressive attacks were likely due to the inherent hostility of wolves. As they collected their loot, he added that he had even gained the Wolf Slayer hostility, which had increased by 40 points the previous day, making things even more intense. Ichiju then told Nao that despite the difficulties, it was perfect for leveling up, and he decided that they should rest. Nao stumbled a bit, but Ichiju caught her in time and asked if she was okay. She reassured him that she was fine and that he didn't need to worry. He emphasized that she had drained too much stamina from using magic and decided they should take a break on a bench near a vending machine. While Nao enjoyed her drink, Ichiju began talking about the axe, explaining how incredibly sharp it was, making cutting through the black wolf feel like slicing butter. He also mentioned how surprised he was when using it, and now he truly believed that the difference in power between regular weapons and the Minotaur's axe was terrifyingly vast. Ichiju began swinging the axe proudly, boasting that with it in his arsenal, he'd have no problem defeating even a fully upgraded boss. However, Nao focused on his swinging and quickly told him to stop, saying it was dangerous. Ichiju remembered that if they died and respawned, they'd have to find the axe again, which would be quite troublesome. Then he had a clever idea, registering the axe in his inventory, considering the possibility that by doing so they could still use it after reviving from death. Nao was somewhat surprised by this, thinking to herself that Ichiju was acting overly excited like a child. Eventually, she got caught up in his enthusiasm and stood up, declaring that she was fine and ready to continue leveling up. Ichiju insisted that they should still rest, but now firmly stated that she was okay. Before she could finish her sentence, they heard a chilling scream from the road ahead. Ichiju speculated that a monster was being attacked in that direction. Now then suggested that they should go help, and Ichiju agreed. They ran together toward the sound, with Ichiju warning Now to be cautious, saying that rushing in blindly would be dangerous. As they slowed down, Ichiju felt that the scream had come from the area ahead. Suddenly another man appeared from around a corner, colliding with Ichiju's axe. Ichiju asked if the man was okay, but he only shoved Ichiju aside, shouting that Ichiju was in his way and that he needed to get out of there immediately. Watching the man flee, Ichiju wondered what was going on and if the scream had come from him. Now, facing the other direction, called out to Ichiju and pointed ahead. Ichiju turned around, horrified to see a horde of monsters of all kinds charging toward them. Nao panicked, questioning why there were so many monsters. Ichiju began running and told Nao to follow, but her legs gave out from fear. She fell to her knees, despairing that they couldn't escape. As the monsters drew closer, Ichiju turned back, ran to Nao, and quickly scooped her up, starting to run again. The monsters chased them, and soon after, a black wolf grabbed Nao from Ichiju's arms. Ichiju watched in horror as a black wolf bit into Nao's shoulder, tearing a chunk of flesh from her. A goblin joined in, and soon the monsters surrounded her, ripping her apart amidst her agonized screams. Ichiju then activated his sprint skill, running along the walls of nearby buildings, desperately trying to reach Nao. When he saw her, he reached out, but before he could grab her hand, a giant bee stung her with its venomous stinger. Amidst the frenzy of monsters, he held her broken body and wept in despair. A notification appeared, confirming Nao's death, and triggering the resurrection skill. Ichiju awoke in his hospital bed, realizing what had just happened. He immediately went to Nao's room and asked if she was okay. He said he was about to open the door and come in, but Nao quickly told him to stop, and asked him to leave her alone for now. The traumatic event had left Nao's psyche deeply scarred. Later, Nao found herself in the midst of battle again. Just before Ichiju woke up, she had been resurrected from death. A few soldiers were defending her, fighting off giant bees, urging her to hold on. She recalled that this was the moment just before Ichiju had awakened, realizing the resurrection skill had activated because she had died. Nao decided to join the battle, but when she saw the bees, she remembered her gruesome death. This caused her to panic, crouching down while screaming uncontrollably. The soldiers decided to move Nao to safety. Nao returned to her hospital room, still trembling as the memories of her death continued to flood her mind, leaving her feeling terrified beyond words. Ichiju woke up, frustrated that he had let Nao die again. He questioned whether he truly had the ability to protect her. Suddenly, he heard her screams. Before he could get up to check on her, one of the soldiers met him and introduced himself as Karube, a lieutenant colonel of the Japan Ground Self-Defense Force. Ichiju recalled Karube visiting him at that moment. He reasoned that if the events were repeating without any issues, the Black Wolves would begin their attack at night. Karube then asked Ichiju about his strength. Initially, Ichiju was confused, but Karube clarified that he was referring to the Minotaur's axe leaning against the wall beside him. Karube mentioned that somehow the axe had appeared there before Ichiju woke up. For Ichiju, this was both surprising and a relief, as he realized that registering the weapon in his inventory had been a smart move. Ichiju replied that it seemed to be his power. He reminded himself that now wasn't the time to give up. He stood up, and when Karube asked where he was going, Ichiju answered that since they needed him to defeat the boss, he would do whatever was necessary. He also warned Karube about an incoming Black Wolf attack, advising him to stay away from the entrance hall. Meanwhile, Ichiju headed to Nao's room. After knocking on the door, he announced that he was coming in. When he entered, he found Nao huddled in a corner, covered with a blanket. He sat down on her bed and apologized, saying that if he had been able to protect her, she wouldn't have died. In a trembling voice, Nao told him not to apologize, blaming herself for interfering with his strength and putting him in danger. She said he was incredible for being able to get back up and keep moving forward, despite dying many times. On the other hand, she admitted that she could no longer control herself. She added that every time she saw the monsters, the memories of the moments before her death flooded back into her mind. Finally, she decided she wouldn't fight anymore because she was too afraid of them. Ichiju's heart ached seeing Nao like this, so he stood up, bent down and hugged her, telling her that it was okay and she didn't have to fight. He promised that he would handle everything and put an end to it all. He made another vow, promising that he wouldn't let Nao die again. However, Ichiju reminded her that to break the cycle of her resurrection, they had to complete the scenario and defeat the boss together, so he would still need her cooperation. He then told her to rest until then. He left her to rest, even though she didn't move from her corner, her head still buried under the blanket. As he walked down the hallway, Ichiju decided that he would fight alone. He remembered how he had always fought by himself and resolved to continue that way to avoid causing more pain for Nao. With that in mind, he believed the monsters they had encountered and whoever triggered the Black Wolf attack on the hospital were somehow connected. He reasoned that the boss monster, the one commanding the Black Wolves, had likely come to this city, and the creature's attacks, followed by their retreat, suggested a large-scale migration. Ichiju decided to investigate further. When he reached the lobby, he saw 2 people there and warned them that monsters were coming and they should leave immediately. Both looked at him with skepticism, and he told them that a pack of black wolves would arrive in minutes. It would be best to get far away before they were killed. One of the strangers, wearing a uniform, believed Ichiju was just a troublemaker and had lied to Karube while Ichiju remained silent. The uniformed man continued to provoke him, saying he didn't like the look in Ichiju's eyes. The other stranger, not in uniform, mocked Ichiju, saying he had angered Makimoto, the one in the uniform. Makimoto pressed further, saying he didn't like being ordered around by someone weak. Makimoto grabbed Ichiju's shirt, ready to punch, driven by irrational anger. But before Makimoto could do anything, a black wolf suddenly appeared and charged at them. Makimoto froze in fear, standing still, terrified, while Ichiju effortlessly took down the monster with a single sweep of his hand. Makimoto, now on the ground, stared at the scene with wide eyes, filled with fear. Ichiju turned to him with a menacing expression and warned him to stay out of the way if he didn't want to die. Meanwhile, a few soldiers near the lobby witnessed what had just happened. Karube cautioned them not to let their guard down, telling them that if any more monsters showed up, it was their responsibility to deal with them. One soldier noticed that Karube didn't seem too concerned about it. Karube, with surprise in his eyes, looked at the man who had just defeated the monster boss, comparing him to a demon. Back in the lobby, Ichiju had already slain several black wolves, with only one left, cowering and trembling in a corner. Ichiju told the wolf that it had to run before it was too late, as he was giving it a chance to live. The creature fled, unaware that it was leading Ichiju to the boss's lair. The black wolf retreated to the boss's hideout, an abandoned subway station. Ichiju steeled himself and decided to follow, preparing to face what lay ahead. As Ichiju walked through the quiet, blood-stained subway station, he noticed the increasing number of corpses. He also sensed an evil aura similar to that of the Minotaur. Looking down a staircase, he guessed that the boss was deeper within. At the bottom of the stairs, he spotted a black wolf, likely the one he had spared earlier. Further down, there were more black wolves. At first, it seemed like just a pack, but upon closer inspection, he realized it was an entire horde. Ichiju quickly understood that there were far too many wolves for him to handle without his axe. Pushing that thought aside, he felt a terrifying presence. Emerging from the shadows, the boss finally appeared, and for the first time in a long while, Ichiju felt true fear. He glanced at the creature's stats and grew even more frightened. A massive werewolf, level 93, stepped out of the darkness. Panicked, Ichiju realized the danger he had walked into. The wolf's stats far outmatched his, even worse than when he fought the Minotaur. He admitted that with his current abilities and the axe, he would be killed instantly. Deciding that he had gathered enough information, Ichiju concluded that retreating was the best option. With that, he bolted, running as fast as he could until he was a safe distance from the subway station. Panting, he sat down to rest in front of a nearby building. Ichiju admitted to himself that although it might take time, he had no other choice but to level up until he could fight the boss. Unfortunately, he still didn't know how to trigger a quest against the monsters, because if he did, he could level up faster. Suddenly, he heard a rattling noise and turned around, only to see a low-level goblin trying to sneak away from him. He sighed in relief, realizing it wasn't anything serious, and suddenly remembered that so far, the only quests he had were against goblins and the Minotaur. He also realized that even if he was killed by any monsters lower than his level, no quests had been triggered. Thinking about this, an idea sparked in his mind. He reasoned that quests only activated when he was killed by enemies of equal or higher levels. Realizing this, he remembered that there were orcs in a nearby city and decided to test his theory. He sprinted toward the neighboring city and kept running until he heard grunting sounds coming from a ruined house. Peering inside, he saw an orc hunched over, devouring a corpse. Seeing that the orc was level 59, Ichiju decided that since it was close to his own level, there was a chance a quest might be triggered. He began taunting the orc, telling it that it must be hungry, and offering himself as a tasty meal, urging it to come closer. The orc charged at him, raising its spiked club and smashing it into Ichiju's head. However, the blow did little more than stun him. Surprised and frightened, the orc stared at him. Ichiju then told it that one hit wouldn't do much and that it should try harder, attacking him with all its strength. The orc began assaulting Ichiju with everything it had, swinging wildly from left to right in a fury. Ichiju realized he had made a mistake in leveling up his physical strength too much, as it meant he wouldn't die easily. This was turning into a painful, drawn-out ordeal. The orc paused for a moment, exhausted from putting all its energy into the attacks, still unable to believe Ichiju was standing. Ichiju told himself that everything hurt, and he would never get used to the sensation of dying. No matter how many times it happened, it was always a painful and terrifying experience. But if it meant Nao wouldn't have to go through it, he was willing to take her place without question. Ichiju knew he would continue dying repeatedly until he achieved his goal. A notification appeared, confirming Ichiju's death, and triggering his resurrection skill. After being resurrected, Ichiju checked, and as he had predicted, a new quest had been activated, requiring him to kill 50 orcs. He immediately headed to the nearby town and completed the quest, quickly leveling up and earning 30 points. Perhaps the process of resurrection had left a significant mark on Ichiju, making him one of those rare individuals whose temporary embrace of death fundamentally changed them. He had a justifiable reason to save Nao, even if it meant risking his life. His determination was firm and admirable. As Ichiju's journey continued, thanks to completing the quest, he accumulated a total of 47 points and raised his status value to level 17. Although it was slower than he had hoped, he realized that his mana had recovered, and now was the time to improve some of his abilities and skills. The big question on his mind now was which skill to upgrade. He decided to enhance his physical recovery ability, knowing that it would allow him to heal better and faster. After numerous resurrections, some lingering effects from past battles still clung to Ichiju. For example, when he faced the Minotaur, he could still feel the residual impact of that fight. Now, with no other choice, spending 30 points seemed like a large cost. But what needed to be done had to be done. He decided to use the remaining points to acquire something that would help him handle the boss when the time came. Instead of increasing his status values, this was a moment for big brain thinking. Ichiju considered the best path forward. The boss's speed could be managed by upgrading his sprint ability, so he didn't worry too much about that. His biggest concern was the final blow that Ichiju lacked. He decided to learn a new skill, Power Boost Level 1, for 15 points. Power Boost was an enhanced version of Sprint, temporarily boosting the user's strength beyond that of the enemy. With Power Boost, he could overcome the defenses of the ghostly wolf boss. Ichiju then noticed that the required points for skills had increased. Previously, the skill only cost 10 points. He realized that the point cost might scale with his status values and wondered if this applied to other skills as well. One thing remained, figuring out the attack patterns of the werewolf and what quest would appear if he died. Ichiju prepared himself for action now that everything was ready, and the only thing left was Nao's decision. After his death was confirmed and he resurrected, all the pain vanished thanks to his enhanced physical recovery abilities. It was time to act, and as he made his way to where Nao was, he encountered Karube, who was on his way to check if Ichiju was all right. Karube looked confused and worried, unsure if Ichiju was strong enough to continue. Ichiju avoided explaining and promised Karube that he would defeat the boss monster. He left, leaving Karube puzzled, and headed toward Nao. When he arrived, he found that she wasn't ready to join him. She was terrified of facing the monsters. Ichiju explained that she didn't need to participate in the fight. They would first face the werewolf, then the boss monster. After defeating the boss, their quest would be complete, and a new one would appear. Nao asked if she had to attack the monster at all. Ichiju told her she only needed to strike the boss monster once during the battle. If she attacked once and immediately hid, she would be safe. He promised her that he wouldn't let her die. Ichiju reassured Nao that she was ready to go with him, since her only role was to provide a brief distraction with a single attack. However, the path they initially chose had a few monsters in the way, so Ichiju decided to take a detour, doing his best to avoid the creatures, and apologized to Nao once again for the inconvenience. They encountered a giant eye spider, which terrified Nao so much that she couldn't find the words to warn Ichiju. Nevertheless, Ichiju swiftly killed all the spiders and promised her he would always protect her. He told her to look ahead and assured her that everything was fine, which comforted her and gave her the confidence to decide to fight alongside him. Ichiju worried that if he failed in the upcoming battle with the boss monster, Nao might never be able to recover. This fueled his determination not to let her die, and reminded him of the importance of victory. He knew his plan and had experience fighting werewolves. If he stayed calm, he could win. Ichiju resolved to succeed, and with encouragement from Nao, the two pressed forward toward the monster. The path leading to the station was dark and stained with blood, making them realize this was no ordinary station. Ichiju reiterated the plan to Nao. According to him, she only needed to land one hit on the monster. That way, when he defeated it, her quest would also be completed. Nao nodded, holding her gun in hand, saying she understood completely. She seemed much braver than before, which made Ichiju think this might be a good sign. Ichiju knew the boss's minions would soon attack the hospital, so he needed to finish the mission quickly. They continued on for a while before Ichiju suddenly stopped. The system notified Ichiju that he had finally found the monster that had defeated him before. It was a C-rank quest requiring Ichiju and Nao to eliminate the werewolf. Nao was terrified, which was inevitable as the monster emerged from the shadows. With its massive size, glowing eyes, fur-covered body and sharp claws, she had every reason to tremble. She reverted to her weaker self, asking if this was truly the monster Ichiju planned to fight and defeat. To Nao, the battle seemed over before it even began, as she saw no way they could beat the giant wolf. The werewolf let out a deafening roar and charged at them, clearly targeting Nao. Ichiju quickly used the Minotaur axe to save her, forcing the monster to retreat momentarily. However, Ichiju realized the creature was even faster than he had anticipated. He had barely reached Nao in time, while she remained frozen in fear at the sight of the massive beast. Ichiju decided to face the beast head-on, preparing for an attack that could match the werewolf's speed. Ichiju activated his sprint skill, feeling they were now evenly matched. He charged at the monster with the Minotaur axe in hand. The battle began, and it was brutal. Claws clashed with metal in a relentless exchange of blows. The werewolf was a tough opponent, but Ichiju held his ground, landing a few solid hits and drawing the monster's full attention toward him. Ichiju called out to Nao, telling her it was time to strike. If she could land just one hit, her part in the battle would be complete, leaving Ichiju to finish off the monster. Nao raised her weapon, aiming directly at the werewolf. However, the monster looked at her with piercing eyes as if saying, "I see you." The moment their eyes met, Nao completely lost her composure. Her hands began to shake, and she dropped her weapon in sheer terror, unable to lift it again. Her faltering drew Ichiju's attention, distracting him and leaving an opening. The werewolf seized the opportunity, striking Ichiju with its claws and sending him crashing to the ground of the station. Nao remained in a state of psychological paralysis, lamenting the immense size and overwhelming strength of the creature they were facing. Ichiju Akira, seeing Nao's condition, realized that she was in no shape to fight. He resolved to take down the monster on his own, promising her that they would face another boss together in the future. Ichiju activated his new ability, Herculean Strength, and charged at the werewolf. This skill leveled the playing field, making the battle much more balanced. In a show of newfound power, Ichiju pushed the werewolf off balance, sending it crashing into a few train cars, smashing them to pieces. Ichiju continued his relentless assault, landing blow after blow on the werewolf, and for a moment, victory seemed within his grasp. The monster lay helpless on the ground, and Ichiju decided to finish it off with a final strike, using the Minotaur axe. He leapt high into the air to gain the advantage, and victory had never seemed so certain. Until the werewolf uttered 3 words, agility boost. Wait, could monsters activate skills too? Ichiju hesitated, his decisive strike slowing as he processed the werewolf's sudden change. With those words, the monster activated a skill, making it faster than before. The werewolf shifted its position just in time, dodging the blow meant to end it. Ichiju was left stunned, unsure of what was happening. The fierce creature didn't stop there. It leaped into the air, using its newfound speed to launch a flurry of rapid claw strikes at Ichiju Akira, delivering a barrage of blows in mere seconds. The force sent Ichiju flying across the station, nearly crashing through the entire building. As the terrifying creature approached, Ichiju was in a daze, needing a moment to analyze its new stats. His analysis confirmed his worst fear. Although the werewolf's level remained at 93, its speed had skyrocketed, now far surpassing Ichiju Akira's. The battered fighter processed this, realizing he had never faced anything like this in his previous battles with monsters. As he thought back to the werewolf's use of its skill name, it dawned on him. These creatures could use skills just like he could. Ichiju quickly noticed that the werewolf wasn't coming directly for him. Upon closer inspection, he realized the monster was heading toward Nao. In a moment of sharp thinking, Ichiju understood the werewolf's plan. It wanted to eliminate Nao first, before turning its full attention back to him. There were many things Ichiju could allow to happen, but he would never let the monster go after the most important person in his life, especially after promising to protect her. Without hesitation, Ichiju drew the werewolf's attention, taunting and provoking it, forcing its focus back onto him instead of Nao. The werewolf seemed determined, not backing down from Ichiju's challenge. It charged at Ichiju with full speed, aiming to knock him off balance with its head. Though Ichiju couldn't dodge this strike, he crossed his arms and braced them against his chest, shielding himself from any significant damage. As a result, the attack only pushed Ichiju back, but it didn't bring him to the ground. He prepared for another strike, but the werewolf had no intention of using the same move again. This time, the beast leaped high into the air once more, and Ichiju instantly recognized the pattern. The werewolf was about to activate its claw barrage once again, a move Ichiju had seen before. Ichiju, realizing the intensity of the situation, poured all his remaining points into boosting his magic power. He activated his sprint skill once more, but this time he also unleashed his enhanced strength to go toe-to-toe with the werewolf. The difference in power between Ichiju and the monster was now minimal, but with the Minotaur axe in hand, Ichiju continued battling the wild beast, meeting every blow with a powerful counterattack. Both sides were taking damage, but Ichiju could still feel his strength holding out. In contrast, the werewolf appeared far more fatigued than before. Ichiju knew the moment had come to finish the fight once and for all. Using the same strategy as earlier, he leaped high into the air, preparing to deliver the final strike from above with the Minotaur axe. However, while still airborne, Ichiju heard a roar he couldn't identify. It distracted him, preventing him from executing his attack properly. At first, the sound was faint, but it grew louder and closer until it was right in front of him. To his shock, the werewolf wasn't alone. It had brought allies into the fray. Ichiju's thoughts raced to the person he had left behind. Now. If more creatures like this were present, there was a real chance they had already captured her. Meanwhile, Nao was deep inside the tunnel, wondering why she no longer heard Ichiju's voice, and questioning whether he was safe. At the same time, Nao faced a new threat. A three-headed wolf was closing in, ready to enjoy its next meal. Ichiju immediately disengaged from the battle in front of him, but the pack of wolves followed closely behind. His only focus was on saving Nao. Ichiju Akira deeply regretted his decision to involve her in this mission, never intending for her to face death. He had only hoped they would complete the quest together. Determined, he vowed to find his way back to Nao, no matter the cost. Meanwhile, Nao was trapped in a psychological battle, frozen in place, sobbing and nearly begging the monsters to leave her alone. Of course, the three-headed wolf did not listen. It moved closer, growling, preparing for its meal. Nao closed her eyes, bracing herself for the worst. But unexpectedly, she was still alive and unharmed. Opening her eyes, Nao saw Ichiju had come to save her once again. Ichiju had taken the hit for her, severely wounded yet still standing, fighting the monster for her sake. Nao called out Ichiju's name, pointing out that he was gravely injured. With a smile on his face, Ichiju dismissed his injuries and once again promised to protect Nao from the wild beast. His last words before returning to the fight were to urge her to hide and save herself, telling her not to worry about the situation because he would handle everything. Nao wondered why Ichiju was always like this. Every time he was beaten down, he always got back up, never giving up in moments like these, always keeping a smile on his face. She remembered a long time ago, back when they were in school. Even when the boys tried to bully her, Ichiju always showed up to protect her, despite being brutally beaten. He still smiled, insisting he was happy as long as she was safe. Ichiju Akira had grown so much since then, but one thing hadn't changed: his desire to protect Nao at all costs. Nao looked back and saw Ichiju badly injured, almost triggering memories of the past. Just like back then, she couldn't do anything to help him. Nao blamed herself for standing by, watching the man who always risked his life for her get beaten, while all she could do was cry in a corner. From that moment on, Nao was determined to be more than just a teammate who cried. She promised herself she would fight alongside Ichiju, becoming someone he could rely on in battle. Nao realized she could either keep crying and wait for Ichiju to save her every time, or she could move forward in this hellish world and face whatever came her way. She wiped away her tears, picked up her weapon, and decided to support Ichiju. The monster was backing Ichiju into a tight corner, so Nao fired a shock arrow at the creature. Ichiju was surprised by her action, but Nao encouraged him not to worry about her anymore, promising that they would win this battle together. Ichiju Akira couldn't be happier to see Nao overcome her mental barrier and join the fight. Now, everything would be much easier without worrying about her crying somewhere. However, Nao's joining him didn't mean things would get easier, especially with another pack of wolves closing in on them. Now, they weren't just facing the three-headed wolf, but the entire pack, along with the werewolf boss. Ichiju knew when to retreat and chose the timing well. He gripped the Minotaur axe in one hand while lifting Nao with the other, running away from the overwhelming threat that was far too much for them to handle. This time, Nao wasn't just a passenger on Ichiju's escape plan. She contributed by using her Black Arrow skill to take down as many creatures as possible. She even destroyed the railway tracks behind them, effectively preventing the wolves from chasing after them. For now, the chase had come to a temporary halt, at least for the moment. Ichiju, Akira, and Nao finally emerged from the subway station, stepping into the vast city. After putting a safe distance between themselves and the wolf pack, they decided to rest for a bit, listening to their body's needs. Ichiju was injured, and Nao wanted to make sure he wasn't in too much pain. Despite this, Akira insisted he was fine, telling her not to worry about him. He admitted that the monsters seemed endless, which was why they had to retreat. He had little time to analyze the battle with the werewolf, but he shared his insights with Nao. Ichiju explained how the werewolf could increase its speed through a skill. According to Ichiju, the terrifying monster had figured out his weakness. Whenever he used his strength-enhancing skill, his speed often decreased. Given the situation, Ichiju acknowledged that losing to the werewolf had been almost inevitable, but he needed to figure out a way to win. That's when Nao spoke up, saying she had an idea on how they could defeat the monster. Ichiju, eager for any suggestion, encouraged Nao to share her plan. Nao explained that it involved a dangerous gamble, but if everything went as she anticipated, they might have a shot at beating the werewolf. Her plan centered around her shock arrow skill. The skill became much stronger when it absorbed additional magical energy. Nao believed that if she used her remaining 7 points to boost her magical power, the shock arrow would become far more potent than usual. With the added strength, it could potentially be powerful enough to take down the werewolf. Ichiju acknowledged it was a good plan, but he knew if Nao called that tree dangerous, something was definitely off. So, he asked about its drawbacks. Nao revealed that it would take her at least 3 minutes to unleash her strongest attack. The issue was that during the absorption process, she had to remain still and couldn't move. Ichiju realized his role in this plan. It seemed his task was to face the entire wolf pack while Nao absorbed magical energy for 3 minutes. All he had to do was hold on for 3 minutes. That shouldn't be too difficult, right? Nao worried about Ichiju's fighting ability in his current state, especially since he had been heavily defeated in the previous battle. She expressed her worries to Ichiju, but he smiled once more and told her not to worry about him. Ichiju told Nao that he trusted her and pleaded with her to respond by trusting him. They almost shared a moment, but something immediately shattered it. The werewolf, along with its pack of minions, suddenly burst out of the train station, heading straight for Ichiju. Finally making an appearance. At this moment, both Ichiju and Nao knew their roles clearly, so they quickly got to work. Nao dashed toward one of the abandoned houses to avoid detection, while Ichiju faced the problem head-on. This had to be the final battle, and both sides seemed ready for it. The pack of wolves charged at Ichiju as he examined his Minotauro axe. The fight raged on as Ichiju tried to dodge lethal strikes while countering with some of his own. The minions were now engaged in battle with Ichiju, but he recognized that wolves were usually stronger when attacking in packs. However, the determination of a single man helped him stand firm against the entire wolf pack. Ichiju noted the time and realized he just needed to hold out for one more minute against the wolves. As long as the werewolf didn't interfere with the fight, everything would be fine. The werewolf leaped high, unleashing a claw attack, throwing a barrage of blades toward Ichiju. Surrounded by minions, Ichiju didn't anticipate this strike. He hadn't expected the werewolf to underestimate its pack. The attack hit him just as the wolves charged. But that wasn't all. The werewolf seemed eager for action, immediately diving into the fray and forcing Ichiju back several meters with its punches. Ichiju was severely injured at that moment, and now watched in horror from her hiding place. She struggled to hold herself back, feeling that Ichiju would die if she didn't intervene. However, she knew her skills hadn't reached their full potential yet, making her ineffective against the werewolf. Finally, she recalled Ichiju's words about trusting him and decided to put her plan into action. She was certain she had made the right choice. For moments later, Ichiju emerged from the rubble, charging at the monster. Ichiju truly didn't know when to give up. The battle between man and werewolf was far from over. Ichiju poured all his strength into his punches against the werewolf, knocking it off balance. But as it regained its footing, the werewolf quickly took control, attacking Ichiju and sending him crashing to the ground, nearly immobilized. Savoring the sweet taste of victory, the werewolf approached the fallen warrior. Yet Ichiju wasn't out of hope yet. He called out to Nao, telling her it was time for her to shine. Nao was ready, her skills now fully prepared. Without giving the werewolf a chance to flee or dodge, she aimed precisely at the creature. The werewolf growled, roaring and howling as it was shot, its cries echoing before fading away. Finally, the area was engulfed in brilliant light, making it hard to determine the outcome of Nao's attack. Ichiju and Nao anxiously awaited the result of the battle. They knew that if the monster survived this blow, there would be little left for them to do. At last, the system notified them that the mission was complete. The boss monster was confirmed dead. Ichiju sighed in relief, smiling proudly at Nao's courage and skill. They could finally rest, at least for now.